Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto become the breeder master in the world of DxD? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Golden Seed. The air in the clearing hummed, not with the lazy drone of insects, but with a deeper, more resonant thrum. It was the sound of life, a vibration that pulsed up from the soil, through the tangled roots of ancient trees, and into the soles of Naruto's worn boots. He knelt, palm flat against the damp earth, his eyes closed. This was his sanctuary, a pocket of the world tucked away on the outskirts of Kuo town, where the lifeblood of the planet felt strongest, purest. Here, he wasn't a refugee from a dead world, a warrior without a war, or a man hiding from a past that was little more than ashen memory. Here, he was simply a gardener. He focused, drawing the energy of the clearing into himself. It flowed like warm honey through his veins, a familiar and comforting power that was the antithesis of the churning, destructive chakra of his youth. This was different. This was the power of creation, of nurturing, of growth. He let it pool in his palm, a soft, golden light that seeped from his skin into the ground. Before him, nestled in a patch of moss, was a tiny, withered bulb. The last of its kind, a lunar orchid, a flower said to only bloom under the light of a full moon and store its dew as a potent healing elixir. This one, however, was dying. It was choked by the ambient, low-level corruption that saturated this world, a byproduct of the constant, unseen wars fought by its new gods and devils. "Come on now," he whispered, the words a soft rumble in his chest. "Don't be stubborn." He pushed the golden energy deeper, not with force, but with gentle persuasion. He wasn't commanding the plant. He was negotiating with its life force, offering his own vitality as a catalyst. A faint tremor ran through the bulb. A single, pale green shoot, no thicker than a thread, pushed its way through the soil. It trembled, fragile and uncertain. Naruto narrowed his focus, his brow furrowing with concentration. This was the delicate part. Too little power and the sprout would wither. Too much, and it would burn itself out. A flash of brilliance before turning to dust. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. His own energy, the very essence of his soul, was being poured into this single, tiny life. The shoot grew, spiraling upward with an unnatural grace. A leaf unfurled, then another, each a perfect shade of silver green. Finally, a bud swelled at its apex, tight and promising. With a final, gentle push of energy, the bud shuddered and began to peel open. The petals, impossibly thin and translucent, unfurled like captured moonlight, releasing a soft, ethereal glow and a scent of night-blooming jasmine and clean rain. Naruto slumped back, a wave of exhaustion washing over him. The connection to the clearing receded, leaving him feeling hollowed out, as if he'd given away a piece of himself. He had. That was the cost of his gift, the price of being a breeder. He couldn't create life from nothing, but he could nurture, enhance, and guide what was already there, mending the broken and coaxing forth the dormant. But every act, no matter how small, took its toll. He looked at the perfect, glowing blossom and a faint smile touched his lips. It was worth it. Every single time, he carefully dug up the lunar orchid, soil and all, and placed it in a prepared pot. This one wasn't for his shop. This one was for him. A small reminder of a world where life didn't have to struggle so hard to simply exist. "Another one," Rias Gramori said, her voice a low murmur that barely disturbed the quiet of the occult research club room. Her crimson hair seemed to absorb the dim afternoon light, and her blue-green eyes were fixed on a holographic map of Kuo town projected over the large central table. A single point of light pulsed on the eastern outskirts, a vibrant emerald green, and that stood in stark contrast to the rest of the map's muted tones. "The third time this month," Akano Himahima added, her violet eyes crinkling with amusement as she poured a cup of tea. "Whatever it is, it's certainly energetic. The readings are off the charts, but only for a moment. It's pure life force. No demonic, holy, or draconic signatures. It's just potent." Rias tapped a manicured nail against the table. "It's sloppy. Whatever is causing these surges is leaving a massive energy signature behind." "Amateurs." She took the tea from Akano, the delicate porcelain cup looking small in her hand. Sona's been asking questions. She's worried it might be a new faction trying to move into Kuo. In the corner, Issei Hyodo, the club's newest and most boisterous member, slammed a fist into his palm. So we go bust some heads. Right, show 'em who's boss. His left arm pulsed with a faint red light, the boosted gear itching for a fight. Patience, Issei-kun, Yuto Kiba said, his voice as smooth and pleasant as his handsome face. He leaned against a bookshelf, the very picture of a calm, collected knight. Rias is right. Rushing in without information is foolish. This energy isn't hostile. It's tranquil. It feels weird, Kaneko Tuju stated, her small frame curled up on the sofa. She was nibbling on a chocolate bar, her golden eyes fixed on the pulsing light on the map. It's warm. Too warm. It makes my skin crawl. Quote, Rias considered her pieces. Kaneko's instincts were rarely wrong. An energy that was pure life but still managed to unsettle a Nekomata was an anomaly worth investigating. Kaneko, after school, I want you to do a quiet reconnaissance of that area. The surges always originate from the same general vicinity. There's an old, unclaimed patch of woodland and a few residences just beyond it. See what you can find. Be discreet. Kaneko gave a single, sharp nod, her expression unchanging. A magic circle flared to life in the center of the room, the intricate Grimoire crest glowing a brilliant crimson. The face of Graphia Lucifuge, the silver-haired head maid of the Grimoire household and wife of the devil king Searsex Lucifer, appeared. Her expression was, as always, one of serene professionalism. Rias Ajo-sama, she said, her voice crisp and clear. A stray devil has been confirmed in the abandoned warehouse district. It has already claimed 3 victims. Your presence is requested to deal with the matter. Rias's demeanor shifted instantly. The idle curiosity was gone, replaced by the focused intensity of a high-class devil and a king. We're on our way, Graphia. The circle vanished. All right, everyone, she commanded, standing up. You heard her. Issei, Kiba, you're on the front line. Kaneko, support and disruption. Akano, you have the sky. Let's move. The easy-going atmosphere of the club room evaporated, replaced by the thrum of power and purpose. This was their duty, their responsibility as the devils who managed Kuo town. Astray was a mess to be cleaned up, and they were the ones who held the mop. Naruto's shop was a hole-in-the-wall establishment called the Whispering Leaf. It was nestled between a bustling noodle shop and a quiet bookstore. And most people walked by without a second glance. The inside was a controlled chaos of greenery. Pots and planters covered every available surface, with vines trailing from the ceiling and rare, exotic-looking flowers blooming in defiant bursts of color. The air smelled of damp earth, sweet pollen, and something else, something wild and ancient. He was tending to a pot of faint pulse ferns, their fronds curling and uncurling in response to his proximity, when the little girl came in. She couldn't have been more than 6, with wide, curious eyes and a scraped knee. She was clutching a wilted dandelion. Mister, she said, her voice small, can you fix it? Naruto looked up from his ferns and smiled. It was a genuine, easy smile that reached his eyes. What seems to be the problem? It's sleepy, she said, holding up the flower. I picked it for mommy, but it got sleepy. He wiped his hands on a rag and knelt down to her level. Sometimes flowers get tired when they're away from their home. But I think we can wake this one up. May I? She nodded, handing him the limp weed. Naruto held it in his palm. He didn't need to draw on the energy of the earth for this. He just used a sliver of his own. A tiny spark of the golden life that flowed within him. He pushed it into the stem. The dandelion's head perked up, its yellow petals unfurling as if greeting the morning sun. It looked fuller, more vibrant than it had any right to be. The little girl gasped, her eyes shining with wonder. Wow, you're a magician, he chuckled, handing the flower back to her. Just a gardener. Now get this to your mom before it gets sleepy again. She beamed at him and ran out of the shop, shouting her thanks. Naruto watched her go, the warmth of the small act chasing away of the lingering exhaustion from reviving the lunar orchid. It was these moments that made his quiet life here bearable. These simple, uncomplicated connections. From across the street, perched on a telephone pole, Kaneko watched the exchange. Her assignment had been to observe the area of the energy surges. She had quickly identified the source as a man who lived in a small house behind a ridiculously verdant shop. This man, he was tall, with sun-kissed blonde hair and an easygoing posture. He didn't radiate any power she could recognize. He seemed utterly, disappointingly normal. And yet, she had felt the flicker of energy when he touched that weed. It was tiny, almost imperceptible, but it was the same warm, unsettling energy from the map. She had seen the dandelion transform. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick message to Rias. Target identified. Male. Appears human. Runs a plant shop. Low-level reality warping or life manipulation ability. Seems harmless. Playful. She tucked her phone away, her gaze lingering on the man in the shop. Harmless. Her instincts screamed otherwise. There was something about the way he moved, a coiled stillness beneath the relaxed demeanor. It was the posture of a predator pretending to be prey. She decided she would keep watching. For now. The warehouse district was a graveyard of rusting metal and shattered windows. The sun was setting, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe and crawl. The air was thick with the coppery tang of old blood and the foul stench of demonic corruption. In the center of a cavernous, derelict factory, the stray devil was feasting on its latest victim. It was a hideous creature, a mockery of both man and beast. It had been a minor devil, likely a pawn from some lesser peerage, who let his desires run rampant until his body and soul had twisted into this monstrous form. It was hunched over, all corded muscle and spiky, chitinous plates, its claws tearing at flesh. Disgusting, Rias said, her voice dripping with contempt. She and her peerage stood on a gantry overlooking the scene. Let's get this over with, Issei growled, his red gauntlet already glowing. Boost, a disembodied voice echoed from the gear. Go, Rias commanded. Issei leapt from the gantry, a blur of motion. Take this, you ugly bastard. He yelled, cocking his fist back. The stray looked up, its multiple red eyes fixing on him. It was fast. It abandoned its meal and scuttled sideways, Issei's punch cratering the concrete floor where it had been a second before. Kiba was next, a silver flash as he descended, his holy erasing sword caliburn in hand. He moved with a dancer's grace, his blade of blur aimed at the creature's neck. The stray met his attack with a chitinous forearm, sparks flying as demonic flesh met enchanted steel. The creature was strong, far stronger than a stray of its supposed rank should be. Kaneko dropped from above like a stone, her small fist impacting the stray's back with a sickening crunch. The creature roared in pain, stumbling forward, but the wound, a spiderweb of cracks in its armor, began to seal itself almost instantly with a foul-smelling green ooze. It has high-speed regeneration, Kiba called out, disengaging as the stray swiped at him with razor-sharp claws. Then we'll just have to hit it with something it can't regenerate from. Akeno giggled from above, her usual playful demeanor a chilling contrast to the crackling bolts of holy lightning forming between her hands. Here you go. She unleashed a torrent of golden energy. The stray shrieked as the holy lightning seared its flesh, the smell of ozone and burnt corruption filling the air. It thrashed wildly, but the attack had done its job. The creature was smoking, wounded, and enraged. It locked its eyes on Issei, its primal mind identifying him as the most direct threat. It lowered its head and charged, its bulk shaking the very foundations of the warehouse. Issei, now, Rias yelled. Boost, 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 boost. The gauntlet screamed. Issei's arm was bathed in a verdant green light, power crackling around him. Dragon shot. A massive beam of demonic energy erupted from his gauntlet, slamming into the charging stray. The explosion was deafening. Dust and debris filled the air. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by Issei's heavy panting. As the dust settled, their hopes sank. The stray was still standing. A huge portion of its torso was gone, a gaping, cauterized wound, but it was already regenerating. Green tendrils of flesh were writhing, knitting themselves together at an alarming rate. Impossible, Akeno breathed. It took a full dragon shot and it's still. This is no ordinary stray, Rias said, her own crimson aura beginning to flare around her. The power of destruction, the signature ability of the Bale clan, passed down through the Grimoire line. It was an energy that annihilated whatever it touched, erasing it from existence. Regeneration didn't matter if there was nothing left to regenerate. Everyone, fall back, I'll handle this. Her peerage knew better than to argue. They gave her a wide berth as she began to gather her power. A sphere of black and red energy, crackling with pure obliteration, formed in her hands. It was an overwhelming force, capable of leveling not just the Stray, but the entire warehouse and a good portion of the block with it. It was messy. It was overkill, but it was necessary. Just as she was about to unleash the attack, a calm voice cut through the tension. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Everyone froze. A man was walking into the warehouse from a gaping hole in the far wall, his hands tucked casually in his pockets. He had bright blonde hair and was dressed in simple, practical clothes. He moved with an unhurried gait, as if he were taking a stroll through a park, not stepping into a battle with a monstrous demon. It was the man from the plant shop. Who are you? Rias demanded, her power still swirling in her hands, though her concentration was now split. This is a restricted area. A civilian shouldn't be here. Naruto ignored her, his gaze fixed on the sphere of destructive energy in her hands. You'll poison the land, he said, his tone conversational, as if he were discussing the weather. That power of yours, it doesn't just destroy. It sterilizes. Nothing will grow here for a century. All for a bit of pest control. Seems like a waste. The stray devil, its regeneration nearly complete, let out a guttural roar and charged its new target. It saw the blonde man as an easy meal, an insignificant insect that had wandered into its lair. Issei screamed a warning. Get out of there. Hiba moved to intercept, but he was too far away. Naruto didn't even look at the charging behemoth. He sighed, a sound of mild annoyance, and raised one hand. Be quiet, he said. The concrete floor exploded, not with a violent shattering, but with a surge of impossible life. Vines, thick as a man's torso and glowing with a soft, golden light, erupted from the ground. They were covered in wicked-looking thorns that seemed to be made of amber. They shot forward with the speed of striking vipers, wrapping around the stray devil's limbs, its torso, its neck, arresting its charge instantly. The stray struggled, its immense strength useless against the unyielding grip of the golden vines. It roared in fury and pain, but the sound was quickly muffled. The vines weren't just restraining it, they were consuming it. The Grimoire peerage watched, stunned into absolute silence. Where the amber thorns pierced the stray's chitinous armor, its flesh began to desiccate. The foul green ooze of its regeneration was being siphoned away, drawn into the vines. The creature began to wither, to shrink, its monstrous form deflating like a punctured balloon. Its roars of rage turned into whimpers of terror. It wasn't just being killed, it was being unmade. Its corrupt life force, the very demonic energy that gave it form and power, was being drained, absorbed, and repurposed. The entire process took less than 10 seconds. When it was over, the vines loosened their grip. There was nothing left but a dry, brittle husk that crumbled into a pile of black dust. The vines, their golden glow now brighter and more vibrant, receded back into the concrete, leaving not even a crack behind. In the spot where the stray devil had been annihilated, a small patch of brilliant green grass sprouted, impossibly lush and alive amidst the grime and decay of the factory. A heavy silence descended upon the warehouse. Akino's playful smile was gone, replaced by a look of utter disbelief. Hiba's hand rested on the hilt of his sword, his knuckles white. Issei's gauntlet had powered down, his jaw hanging open. Kaniko's eyes were wide, her usual stoicism shattered. Naruto dusted off his hands and finally turned his attention to Rias. The overwhelming power of destruction she had been holding had dissipated, her control faltering in her shock. See, Naruto said, his voice still calm. Clean, efficient, no mess. Rias found her voice, forcing it to remain steady despite the tremor of shock running through her. That power, it wasn't demonic. It wasn't holy, or draconic. What was that? What are you? I'm a gardener, he replied, giving the same infuriatingly simple answer. And that was just pulling a weed. He walked over to the patch of new grass, kneeling down to touch one of the blades. Life is the ultimate recycler. It wastes nothing. His gaze then shifted, landing on Issei. He looked at the boosted gear, his head tilting with an analytical curiosity that was unnervingly intense. The Welsh dragon, D-Drake, to have the soul of a heavenly dragon, one of the most powerful beings in existence. Trapped inside a glorified bauble to be used as a simple battery, He shook his head, a look of profound disappointment on his face. What a tragic waste of potential. Issei bristled, anger flaring in his chest. Hey, what's that supposed to mean? The boosted gear is awesome. Naruto just gave him a sad smile before standing up. It is what they have allowed you to see. A cage is still a cage, no matter how gilded. He turned to leave, his part in this apparently over. Wait, Rias commanded. You can't just walk away. You interfered in official devil business. You used an unknown power in my territory. You will answer my questions. Naruto paused at the edge of the broken wall, looking back not at her, but past her, towards the darkening sky outside. His eyes, a blue so deep they seemed to hold the color of the primordial ocean, narrowed almost imperceptibly. The easy-going gardener was gone, and for a fleeting second, they saw the warrior beneath. You have bigger problems than a single stray, Rias Grimori, he said, his use of her full name sending a chill down her spine. There are vultures circling your territory. Ones who reek of scorched feathers and broken vows. He took a breath, his senses tasting the air. They've been watching you for some time. They're getting bolder. You should be more concerned with the enemies you know than the strangers you don't. And with that cryptic warning, he stepped out of the warehouse and melted into the twilight shadows, leaving them standing in a silence thick with confusion, awe, and a creeping sense of dread. Rias walked slowly to where the stray had fallen. She knelt, mirroring what Naruto had done, and ran her fingers through the impossibly vibrant grass. It felt electric, buzzing with a clean, potent life force. It was unlike anything she had ever encountered. It was a scar, but not a scar of destruction. It was a scar of creation. Akeno, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I want everything you can find on that man. His name, his history, where he came from, everything. Of course, Rias, Akeno replied, her own voice subdued. They had come here for a simple extermination, a routine part of their lives. They were leaving with the unnerving knowledge that a new piece had just been placed on the board in Kuo. A piece that answered to no one, followed no known rules, and wielded a power that could turn a monster into a meadow. And Rias Grimori had no idea if he was a player, a pawn, or a king. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Grimori Peerage and the Gardener. The silence in the occult research club room was a living thing. It was thick and heavy, pressing in on them from the polished wood of the table and the velvet of the couches. The holographic map of Kuo was gone, but the afterimage of events in the warehouse was seared into the minds of everyone present. They had returned not in triumph, but in a state of profound disquiet. Rias Grimori sat in her high-backed chair, her chin resting on her steepled fingers. Her gaze distant and thoughtful. The usual air of confident authority that surrounded her was fractured, replaced by a veneer of intense, calculating curiosity. He just pulled it apart, Issei finally said. Breaking the quiet, he held up his left arm, the boosted gear dormant and still. That thing took a dragon shot to the face and was regenerating like it was nothing. And that guy, he just, poof, gone. The word, poof, was wholly inadequate, and he knew it. It didn't capture the quiet horror of the stray's life force being siphoned away, of a monster being turned to dust and grass. The energy he used was life itself, Kiba mused, his hand resting on the hilt of the demonic sword Gram at his hip. He was pacing slowly by the window, his usual easy smile absent. It felt ancient, primal. It wasn't holy, so it didn't burn. It wasn't demonic, so it didn't corrupt. It simply consumed. It treated the stray's demonic energy as nutrients. He stopped and looked at Rias. President, that's a power on a conceptual level we've never encountered. To command life to overwhelm and repurpose death, it's a terrifying ability. Akeno set a cup of tea before Rias, her movements precise and deliberate. Her usual teasing smile was gone, replaced by a thoughtful frown. I've cross-referenced every known database, devil, angel, fallen, even the more obscure pantheons. There is no record of any ability like that. There's no mention of any individual matching his description arriving in Kuo, or anywhere else for that matter. His shop, the Whispering Leaf, was registered 6 months ago under the name Naruto Uzumaki. The paperwork is flawless but completely mundane. No history, no family, no past. He simply appeared. A ghost, Kaneko said softly from her corner. She was hugging her knees. Her golden eyes troubled. When he looked at us in the warehouse, it felt like he wasn't just seeing us. He was seeing inside us. He knew what you were, President. He knew about D-Drake. He knew about the fallen angels. He knew, but he had no scent. No demonic taint. No holy grace, nothing. He smelled like the earth after a spring rain. Her description was poetic and deeply unsettling. Rias finally took a sip of her tea, the warmth doing little to dispel the chill in her thoughts. The gardener, Naruto Uzumaki, was an anomaly of the highest order. He was a power that existed outside their established framework. He broke the rules of their world simply by existing. Her power of destruction was the antithesis of his. Hers was the end, his was the beginning, and in their brief encounter, his beginning had proven far more efficient than her end. His warning, she said, her voice cutting through the speculation. Vultures circling, reek of scorched feathers and broken vows. He was talking about the fallen angels. And he said they were getting bolder. Is it possible he's working with them? Issei asked, the thought dawning on him. Maybe he was there to send us a message. Akano shook her head. Unlikely, Issei-kun. His energy felt nothing like a fallen's. It was pure, the opposite of their tainted light. Besides, she added, a hint of her usual mischief returning. If he wanted to send a message, I don't think any of us would have been able to walk away from that warehouse. The statement hung in the air, a truth they all recognized. The power he had displayed was wielded with such casual, effortless control that what they had seen was clearly just the tip of a very large and very dangerous iceberg. No, Rias said, her decision solidifying. He's not an enemy, not yet. He's a neutral party, a powerful one, who has made his home in our territory. We can't allow an unknown factor of this magnitude to operate unchecked. She stood, her presence once again filling the room with the authority of a king. We know nothing about him, and that is a weakness we cannot afford, especially if what he says about the fallen is true. Information is power. We need to know who he is, what he wants, and, most importantly, whose side he is on. So, what's the plan, President? Kiba asked. A direct approach, Rias declared. We will pay Mr. Uzumaki a visit at his place of business. We will not go as devils looking for a fight, but as concerned managers of this territory. We will be polite, we will be inquisitive, and we will get some answers. Her eyes swept over her peerage. Tomorrow, after school, we are going to a flower shop. The next afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent, the 5 members of the Occult Research CL. UB stood across the street from the Whispering Leaf. The shop looked even more innocuous in the daylight, a splash of vibrant green squeezed between its more mundane neighbors. Yet, to their heightened senses, it was anything but ordinary. Can you feel that? Kiba murmured, his eyes narrowed. The air around the shop, it's different. He was right. A palpable aura of vitality radiated from the small building. A stark contrast to the normal, spiritually muted atmosphere of the city. It was like an oasis in a desert. The closer they got, the more pronounced it became. It's the same warm energy from before, Kaneko said, a hand resting on her chest as if to calm a racing heart. It's everywhere. It's in the walls, the windows, the plants are singing with it. Issei, who was the least sensitive to such things, could only shrug. It just smells like flowers to me. But even he couldn't deny the almost dizzying sense of life that seemed to pour from the open doorway. Taking a deep breath, Rias led the way. The moment they crossed the threshold, the sensation intensified 100-fold. They were no longer just near the oasis, they were submerged in it. The air was thick with the scent of 1,000 different blossoms. Of rich soil and clean water. It was almost overwhelming. Plants of every shape and size crammed the small space, their colors so vivid they seemed to hum with light. Flowers that should have been impossible to grow together, from different climates and continents, thrived side by side in perfect harmony. And there, in the center of it all, was Naruto Uzumaki. He was standing at a wooden workbench, humming a tuneless melody as he carefully repotted a small, fiery orange cactus. He was wearing a simple green apron over his clothes and looked up as the bell over the door chimed. A placid smile on his face. "Welcome to the Whispering Leaf," he said, his voice calm and even. His gaze passed over each of them, lingering for a moment on Rias. Rias Grammori. 2. What do I owe the pleasure of a visit from High Devil nobility and her entire peerage? Don't tell me you're here to have me arrested for illegal weed pulling. His casual use of her title and the light-thirted jab about the previous night's events immediately put Rias on the back foot. He wasn't surprised, intimidated, or even particularly curious. He was expecting them. We came to talk, Rias said, recovering her composure. She gestured for her peerage to fan out, a subtle show of presence, though the cramped shop made it feel more like they were huddling. Talk, Naruto said, turning his attention back to his cactus. He gently tapped the side of the new pot, settling the soil. I'm just a humble gardener. I can't imagine what a great lady like yourself would want to talk to me about. Unless you have a problem with aphids. I have a wonderful organic solution for aphids. Akano stepped forward, her smile a mixture of charm and steel. My, a gardener with such a unique talent for pulling weeds. You must tell us your secret. Naruto glanced at her, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. No secret, you just have to listen to what the plants need. He ran a finger along one of the cactus's spines. A tiny, perfect orange blossom bloomed at its tip. This little one was lonely. It just needed some encouragement. The casual miracle was not lost on them. Rias decided to cut through the pleasantries. Mr. Uzumaki, your actions last night were a direct interference in the affairs of the Grammori territory. While we are grateful for your assistance, you cannot simply appear a wield a power of that magnitude without explanation. I saw a pest in my garden, Naruto replied simply, wiping his hands on his apron. Kuo is my home now. I don't like it when things poison the soil. He finally gave them his full attention, leaning back against his workbench. The easygoing demeanor was still there, but his eyes were sharp, analytical. You want to know who I am? What I am? Why I'm here? He gestured around the shop. I told you, I'm a gardener. This is what I do. I nurture life. That's all there is to it. That power is not something a simple gardener possesses, Rias countered, her voice firm. That is the power of a god. Naruto laughed, a genuine, hearty sound that seemed to make the very leaves on the vines around them tremble with amusement. A god? Oh no, nothing so complicated. Gods, devils, angels, you're all so concerned with titles, factions, and power. You build kingdoms and hierarchies. You fight wars over beliefs and territory. He picked up a small, smooth stone from his bench, turning it over in his fingers. I'm not interested in any of that. I'm interested in this. He held up the stone. In the soil, in the roots, in the things that gr. and endure long after your kingdoms have turned to dust. Your power, he said, his gaze settling on Rias, erases things. My power encourages them to grow. We are, as you say, antithetical. You knew about the fallen angels. Kiba interjected, his tone respectful but firm. How? I can feel them, Naruto said, his expression turning serious. Just as I can feel the life in this room, I can feel the absence of it. Their power is a corruption of something that was once pure. It's a discordant note in the song of this world. It's faint, but it's there. And it's getting stronger. They're hunting something, or someone. His eyes flickered towards Issei. Issei felt a jolt, as if he'd been struck by lightning. Sacred gears are fragments of a bygone power, divine in origin, Naruto explained. His voice taking on a professorial tone. The fallen are obsessed with them. They see them as tools, weapons, or blasphemies to be purged. Your presence here, Red Dragon Emperor, is like a lighthouse in a storm for them. They have been watching you since the day you were brought into this world. The revelation hit Issei like a physical blow. He had known the fallen were after him, but Naruto's words framed it with a chilling certainty. He wasn't just a target, he was a beacon. Rias saw her opening. If you know this, then you must understand the danger. Kuo is on the brink of becoming a battleground. I am offering you protection. Join my peerage. As my servant, you would be under the protection of the House of Grammori. Your power would be a tremendous asset, and in return, you would have a place, a purpose. A caller, Naruto finished for her, his voice devoid of any malice. It was a simple statement of fact. You offer me a place in your hierarchy. A role to play in your games. Thank you, Rias Grimori. But I am not a piece to be moved around a board. He set the stone down. I have no interest in serving a king, a god, or anyone else. I serve life, and life, as you may have noticed, does not choose sides. His refusal was absolute, delivered not with arrogance, but with a profound, unshakable sense of self. He wasn't rejecting her, he was rejecting her entire worldview. It was a checkmate she hadn't even seen coming. Frustration warred with fascination on Rias's face. He was impossible. He was powerful enough to be a king in his own right, yet he chose to be a simple shopkeeper. He possessed knowledge that could shift the balance of power, but he offered it as a casual warning. Suddenly, a row of pale, bell-shaped flowers hanging near the door began to tremble violently. Their pristine white petals started to turn a sickly, bruised purple. Naruto's head snapped towards them, his eyes narrowing. "It seems your guests have arrived ahead of schedule," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "What is that?" Akeno asked, her senses flaring. "A shrieking violet," Naruto replied, walking towards the wilting flowers. Highly sensitive to holy power, especially the corrupted kind, he reached out and touched a petal. It immediately began to regain its color. "There are 3 of them. Close. Just a few blocks from here. They're not trying to hide their presence anymore. They're making a statement." As if on cue, Issei's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his face paling as he read the message. "It's from my friend Motohama. He says a girl he was supposed to meet for a date just tried to kill him. He says she had black wings." "A trap," Kiba said instantly. "They were luring you out." "No," Naruto corrected, his gaze still fixed on the street outside. "Not a trap, a declaration of intent. They're showing you that they can touch the people around you whenever they please." He turned back to face them, the easygoing gardener completely gone, replaced by the warrior they had glimpsed in the warehouse. "Your territory is being invaded, Rias Grimori. Your people are being targeted. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" His question wasn't a challenge. It was a test, and as Rias met his intense blue eyes, she understood. He wasn't going to join them. He wasn't going to fight their battles for them. But he had just given them the intelligence they needed to fight for themselves. He had drawn a line in the sand, not between himself and them, but between the sanctity of life in his new home and those who sought to defile it. He was a gardener, and the fallen angels were a blight he would not tolerate. "Akeno, Kiba, Kaneko, with me," Rias commanded, her authority returning in a wave of crimson power. "Issei, stay here. You're the target. We can't risk them getting to you directly." "But, President," Issei protested. "That's an order, Issei," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. She looked at Naruto. "Thank you for the consultation, Mr. Uzumaki." Naruto just nodded. "Try not to sterilize the soil on your way out." As the Grimori peerage rushed out of the shop, their energy signatures flaring as they prepared for battle, Naruto turned back to his workbench. He picked up a small, unassuming seed from a clay bowl. It was dark and gnarled, looking utterly lifeless. He rolled it between his thumb and forefinger, his expression unreadable. Issei, left behind and feeling utterly useless, watched him. "You're just going to stay here?" Issei asked, his voice a mixture of frustration and disbelief. "They could need help. Your king gave you an order, Red Dragon Emperor," Naruto said without looking at him. "You should obey it. Besides," he added, closing his hand around the seed. A soft, golden light seeped between his fingers. "Everyone has their own way of gardening." He opened his hand. The gnarled seed was gone. In its place was a smooth, polished wooden token, intricately carved with the image of a swirling leaf. He held it out to Issei. "What's this?" Issei asked, taking it. It was warm to the touch. "A seed of perception," Naruto said. "Hold on to it. It will help you see the difference between a cage and a key." Before Issei could ask what he meant, Naruto walked to the back of the shop and disappeared through a curtained doorway, leaving Issei alone with the humming, vibrant life of the plants, the distant thrum of a brewing battle, and a cryptic piece of wood that felt impossibly alive in his hand. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Blight on the Soil. The scream was a high, thin sound of pure terror that sliced through the evening air. It was followed by the shatter of glass and the sizzle of holy energy striking asphalt. In a small, manicured park a few blocks from Naruto's shop. Motohama scrambled backward, his glasses askew, his face a mask of disbelief and fear. The girl he'd met online, the one with the impossibly pretty smile and gothic Lolita dress, was floating in the air before him. Her back now adorned with a single pair of black, feathered wings. In her hand, a spear of pure, white gold light crackled with malevolent energy. "Oh, don't look so scared, sweetie," the fallen angel, Mittelt cooed, her voice a saccharine poison. "I was just going to poke you a little. A little insurance to make sure your perverted friend comes out to play." She drew her arm back. The spear of light aimed at Motohama's chest. The human was paralyzed, a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming divine judgment. Before she could throw it, a flash of crimson light erupted between them. Rias Grimori stood there, her arm outstretched, a wisp of the power of destruction fading from her fingertips where she had just neutralized the nascent attack. Behind her, Akeno, Kiba, and Kaneko landed in a coordinated, silent display of force. "I believe this is a private party," Rias said, her voice dangerously calm. "And you were not invited." Mittelt's pretty face twisted into a sneer. "Rias Grimori, the little sister of the false Lucifer. We were hoping you'd show up." From the shadows of the park's trees, two more figures emerged. One was a woman with long, blue hair and a cold, cruel expression, Calawarner. The other was a man, tall and severe, with short cropped silver hair and 3 pairs of black wings that marked him as a high-ranking cadre. He wore a pristine white uniform that did little to hide the fanatic's zeal burning in his eyes. "That's far enough, Mittelt," the man commanded, his voice a low, resonant baritone. "The bait has served its purpose." He stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the Grimori peerage with disdain. "I am Cassiel. We have come on the authority of Governor Azazel to pass judgment upon the blasphemous sacred gear wielder residing in this town." Azazel would never sanction an open attack in a signatory's territory, Rias countered, her own demonic energy beginning to rise, a crimson aura shimmering around her. "You're acting without orders. You are nothing but renegades." Cassiel smiled, a thin, humorless expression. "Semantics. The Red Dragon Emperor is a threat to the balance. His power is an affront. We are here to correct that mistake. Now, hand him over, and we will leave your precious little town in peace." "My answer," Rias said, raising her hand as a sphere of destructive energy began to coalesce, "is no." "So be it," Cassiel sighed. A theatrical display of disappointment. "Kill them, but leave the Grimori girl for me. I wish to send her brother a message." The battle began without any further preamble. It was a blur of speed and power. Kiba shot forward, a silver streak aimed at Calawarner, his demonic sword Gram already in hand. Calawarner met his charge with a pair of light spears, her movements fluid and practiced. The clang of steel against holy energy echoed through the park. Mittelt shrieked with delight and launched herself at Kaneko, conjuring a dozen smaller light spears that she sent raining down. Kaneko didn't dodge, she met the barrage head-on, her small fists shattering the holy constructs with blows that sent shockwaves through the air. Each impact was like a thunderclap, a testament to the raw physical power contained in her tiny frame. Akeno took to the sky, her black devil wings carrying her high above the fray. Her giggle was a chilling counterpoint to the bolts of holy lightning that danced at her fingertips. Era, a fallen angel who wants to play with lightning. Let me show you how it's done." She unleashed a torrent of golden energy towards Cassiel. The high-ranking fallen didn't even flinch. He raised a single hand and a barrier of pure, condensed light appeared before him, absorbing Akeno's attack completely. "A Himahima half-breed," he sneered, his voice filled with contempt. "The daughter of Barakiel, how far you have fallen, to serve these filth." The mention of her father's name caused Akeno's smile to falter for a fraction of a second. A flicker of pain in her violet eyes before it was replaced by a cold fury. The sky above her began to darken as she gathered more power, thunder rolling not just in the air, but in her soul. Rias and Cassiel were locked in a battle of wills, their respective auras clashing in the center of the park. Grass withered and turned black where their energies met. Rias was powerful, a prodigy of destruction. But Cassiel was a veteran of the Great War. He was older, more experienced, and his control over his holy power was absolute. He parried her blasts of destruction with precise, efficient rears and countered with spears of light that were so fast they seemed to tear rips in the air itself. He was testing her, gauging her limits, and it was clear he was not yet using his full strength. The Grimoire peerage was strong, but the fallen were coordinated and ruthless. Calawarner was a skilled warrior, keeping Kiba on the defensive with a relentless flurry of attacks. Mittelt, despite her childish demeanor, was cunning, using her speed and ranged attacks to keep Kaneko from closing the distance. And Cassiel was an immovable object, effortlessly deflecting Akino's lightning while pressuring Rias. They were being systematically dismantled. Back in the quiet, green-filled space of the Whispering Leaf, Issei was pacing like a caged animal. Every distant tremor of power, every faint echo of battle that reached his ears, sent a fresh wave of frustration and helplessness through him. He was the Red Dragon Emperor, one of the most powerful beings in the world, and he had been benched. He had been told to stay put while his friends, his king, his family, were fighting for their lives, and for him. "This is bullshit," he muttered, slamming a fist against a wooden shelf, rattling a row of potted succulents. "I should be out there." Naruto was at his workbench, seemingly oblivious to Issei's turmoil. He was carefully trimming the leaves of a bonsai tree, his movements slow and deliberate. The tiny, ancient-looking tree seemed to respond to his touch, its leaves rustling softly, its branches shifting into a more pleasing, balanced shape. "Your king gave you an order," Naruto said, his voice as calm as a still pond. He didn't look up from his work. "She believes your presence on the battlefield would be a liability, not an asset. She is trying to protect you." "I don't need protecting," Issei snapped, his voice cracking with adolescent indignation. "I'm not some fragile package. I'm a warrior. I have the boosted gear." "Do you?" Naruto asked, finally pausing his work. He set his small shears down and turned to face Issei, his blue eyes holding a disconcerting level of clarity. "Or does the boosted gear have you?" Issei was taken aback. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You see it as a weapon. A tool," Naruto continued, walking towards him. "You shout its name, you demand its power, and it gives you a surge of energy. You punch things with it. It's a very straightforward, very crude application of its potential." He stopped in front of Issei. "Tell me, Issei Hyodo, have you ever actually spoken to the dragon whose soul is trapped in your arm?" The question caught Issei completely off guard. "Spoken to him? I mean, he talks sometimes. Yells, boost, and stuff. He told me about the Juggernaut drive once. But we don't really chat." Naruto shook his head, with a sigh of disappointment that felt more painful to Issei than any physical blow. "A prison guard does not chat with his prisoner. You are Didraig's warden, not his partner. You treat him as a resource to be exploited. So he treats you as a vessel to be endured. You are connected, but you are not in harmony. That is why your king sees you as a liability. Your power is borrowed, not earned. It is uncontrolled, unfocused. You are a child swinging a sledgehammer in a room full of priceless art." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, puncturing Issei's pride and striking at the heart of his deepest insecurities. He was weak. He was a pervert. He stumbled into this world by accident. He wasn't a hero like Kiba or as powerful as Akino or Rias. He just had this thing on his arm, and he clung to it like a life raft. "So what am I supposed to do?" Issei asked, his anger deflating into a quiet desperation. "You start by listening," Naruto said. He gestured to the wooden token he had given Issei, which the boy was clutching in his right hand. "I gave you a seed of perception. It is not a weapon. It is a key. It is attuned to the flow of life, both your own and the world around you. Clear your mind of the noise, of the anger and the fear. Hold the seed, and just listen." Issei looked down at the smooth, warm token. It felt ridiculous, listening to a piece of wood while his friends were fighting. But the earnest, unwavering conviction in Naruto's eyes compelled him. He closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, the air thick with the scent of pollen and damp earth. He focused on the warmth of the token in his palm. At first, there was nothing. Just the frantic pounding of his own heart and the distant, muffled sounds of combat. He felt stupid. This was a waste of time. He was abo. To open his eyes when a new sensation trickled into his awareness. It started as a faint hum, a vibration that seemed to come from the token itself. The hum grew, resolving into a complex tapestry of sounds and feelings. He could feel the thrumming life of every plant in the shop, a chorus of quiet, persistent energy. He could feel the nervous, frantic energy of the city outside. And then, he felt them. He felt Rias's power, a raging inferno of destruction, but underneath it, he felt her fear, her fierce, desperate need to protect her own. He felt Akino's power, a crackling storm of lightning, laced with a deep, bitter sorrow. He felt Kiba, a sharp, focused blade of demonic energy, but it was tinged with a phantom pain, an echo of a past he didn't understand. He felt Kaneko, a dense, solid weight of power, a mountain of strength hiding a core of loneliness. He was feeling their souls. Then, a new voice, ancient and powerful, rumbled not in his ears, but in the very center of his being. It has been centuries since a wielder has possessed this level of empathy. You can feel them. Issei's eyes shot open. Didraig, this man, the gardener, he is not wrong, the dragon's voice continued. A note of grudging respect in its tone. You have treated me as a tool, an artifact. You have never sought to understand the soul within the machine. This seed, it has opened a door between us that has long been sealed. The wooden token in Issei's hand began to glow, a soft, green light. The light flowed up his arm, sinking into the red gauntlet. The boosted gear materialized, but it felt different. The power wasn't just a heavy weight on his arm, it was a warm, flowing current that connected to his heart, to his very soul. I can feel you, Didraig, Issei whispered, awestruck. Not just your voice, I can feel your loneliness, your pride, and I can feel your courage, Issei Hyodo, and your foolish, reckless, and utterly human heart. Perhaps we can be more than warden and prisoner. Boost, Issei whispered, not as a command, but as a request. Boost, Didraig's voice replied, and the surge of power that followed was different. It was cleaner, stronger, and it didn't feel like alone. It felt like it was his. He looked at Naruto, who was watching him with a small, knowing smile. I understand, Issei said, his voice filled with a newfound resolve. Good, Naruto replied. Then you understand that a king's greatest strength is not her own power, but the power of her pieces working in harmony. Your king is fighting alone, trying to shield her peerage. She is forgetting that you are her strongest piece. Go, remind her what it means to be the Red Dragon Emperor of the Grimoire peerage. Issei nodded, his eyes burning with determination. He turned and ran, shattering the shop's glass door in his haste, not out of recklessness, but because he no longer had time for trivial things like handles. Naruto watched him go, then turned to look at the bonsai tree. A bit of pruning, a bit of sunlight, he murmured to himself. And even the most stubborn sapling can learn to grow. In the park, the battle was turning against them. Kiba had a deep gash on his arm. The holy energy of Kalawarner's spear sizzling against his devil physiology. Kaneko was being battered, Mittelt's constant aerial bombardment forcing her into a defensive battle. At was slowly chipping away at her stamina. Akino was locked in a duel of raw power with Cassiel, who was now wielding a massive greatsword made of pure light, and for every bolt of lightning she threw, he returned a blow that shook the heavens. Rias was growing desperate. Her peerage was being injured. Civilians were in danger. Her pride as a king was being shredded. She saw an opening as Cassiel parried one of Akino's attacks. It was time to end this. Everyone, fall back, she yelled, her voice ringing with power. An immense sphere of the power of destruction, larger and more volatile than the one she had summoned in the warehouse, began to form between her hands. It pulsed with black and red light, sucking in the air around it, promising absolute annihilation. This was it. This was the attack that would erase these renegades, but it would also erase the entire park and the surrounding city block. It was a price she was willing to pay. President, don't, Kiba yelled, seeing the sheer scale of the attack. But Rias was committed. Her eyes were locked on Cassiel, who watched the growing sphere not with fear, but with a smug, victorious smile. This was the message he wanted to send. Rias Grimoire, forced to destroy her own territory to defeat him. Just as she was about to unleash it, a red blur slammed into her. Issei, his boosted gear glowing with a vibrant, pulsating light, had tackled her, sending them both tumbling to the ground. The sphere of destruction flew harmlessly into the sky, detonating against the clouds with a silent, terrifying flash that momentarily turned night into day. "Issei, what are you doing?" Rias screamed, a mixture of fury and shock. "I gave you a direct order. You were going to destroy everything." Issei yelled back, scrambling to his feet, and placing himself between her and the fallen angels. He felt different. He stood taller. The perverted, goofy look was gone from his eyes, replaced by a steely focus. "We are your peerage. We fight with you, not behind you. Stop trying to carry everything on your own." For the first time since she had resurrected him, Rias was truly speechless. She was looking at Issei, but it was as if she were seeing him for the first time. "Welsh Dragon. Balance Breaker." Diedrag's voice boomed, not just from the gauntlet, but from the sky, from the earth, from Issei's very soul. Crimson armor, sleek and powerful, erupted over Issei's body. It was the scale mail, the manifestation of the Red Dragon Emperor's true power. But this too was different. It wasn't just armor, it was alive. Green lines of energy, the same color as the light from Naruto's seed, pulsed through the gaps in the plates, and the gems on the armor glowed with a soft, vital light. Cassiel's smug expression vanished, replaced by one of genuine shock and outrage. "Balance breaker. Impossible. A fledgling devil like him shouldn't have the power to." "Diedrag and I had a little talk," Issei said, his voice now electronically filtered by the helmet. He clenched his fist, and the power that rolled off him was immense, stable, and perfectly controlled. He turned to Rias. "President, please, allow me. Let me be your pawn." Rias stared at him, at the overwhelming power he now commanded, at the unwavering loyalty in his eyes. He had disobeyed her, yes, but he had done it for the right reasons. He had done it to save her from herself. A slow smile spread across her face, a genuine, proud smile. "Very well, my pawn. Show them the power of the House of Grimoire." What happened next was not a battle, it was a rout. Issei was a tempest of draconic power. He moved with a speed that Cassiel could barely track, his blows landing with the force of meteors. He intercepted Calawarner's spears, shattered Mittelt's bombardments, and met Cassiel's light sword head-on. The clash of dragon armor and holy energy sending shockwaves that shattered every window for a mile. But even as Issei turned the tide, something else was happening. The park itself seemed to be coming to their aid. When Calawarner tried to retreat, the roots of an ancient oak tree snaked out of the ground and wrapped around her ankles, holding her fast for Kiba to disarm her. When Mittelt tried to gain altitude for another attack, a sudden, unnaturally thick fog rolled in, reducing visibility to zero and allowing Kaneko to leap up and deliver a devastating BL. Ow, that sent the fallen angel crashing to the earth. Cassiel found his own movements hampered. The ground beneath his feet would turn to soft mud at crucial moments, robbing him of his footing. Vines would drop from trees, obscuring his vision. The very environment had become hostile to him and his soldiers, while seeming to offer nothing but aid to the devils. Rias watched this, her eyes wide with a dawning realization. This wasn't random. This was controlled. This was subtle, precise, and utterly brilliant. It was Naruto. He wasn't fighting their battle, but he was tending to the garden in which it was being fought. Overwhelmed, injured, and thoroughly outmaneuvered, Cassiel made his choice. With a roar of fury, he unleashed a massive wave of holy light, forcing everyone back. He grabbed his two downed subordinates. "This isn't over, Grimoire," he snarled, his eyes blazing with hatred as he looked from the armored Issei to the park that had turned against him. "A new power has entered this game. Lord Kokobile will hear of this. Winter is coming for you all." With that, he unfurled his 6 wings and shot into the sky, vanishing into the night. The park fell silent, the only sounds, the ragged breathing of the devils and the soft rustling of leaves. Issei's armor dissipated, leaving him panting but triumphant. He had done it. He had protected them. Rias walked over to him, her expression unreadable. She stopped before him, and for a moment, he thought she was going to punish him for his insubordination. Instead, she reached out and gently brushed a stray leaf from his hair. "You were magnificent, Issei," she said, her voice soft with a pride that made his heart swell. "You disobeyed a direct order, and I have never been more proud of you." She then turned her gaze in the direction of the whispering leaf. They had won. but they had not done it alone. An unknown, unseen force had shaped their victory, guiding their hands and protecting their home. The gardener had tended his soil, and in doing so, had saved them all. The game had changed, and Rias knew, with a certainty that was both thrilling and terrifying, that Naruto Uzumaki was at the very center of it. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. Roots of the World. The Occult Research Club room felt different. The air, usually relaxed and filled with the easy camaraderie of Rias's peerage, was now taut with a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Issei was the quiet epicenter of this new atmosphere. He sat on the couch, not boasting or preening as he might have before, but staring at his left arm as if it were a foe. Rain object he was only just beginning to understand. The boosted gear was dormant, but a faint, warm connection now pulsed between him and the ancient dragon soul trapped within. It was a silent conversation, a newfound harmony that had left him feeling more grounded and powerful than any 10 power boosts ever had. Kiba was tending to the gash on his arm, a faint green light from Ossia Argento's twilight healing closing the last of the wound. He was smiling, but the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He kept glancing at Issei, a look of genuine admiration mixed with a sliver of something else, a shadow of his own painful past. Stirred by the battle with holy power, Kaneko was methodically working her way through a family-sized bag of chips, her crunching the only steady sound in the room. Akano poured tea, her movements graceful as ever, but her usual teasing aura was replaced by a thoughtful, almost predatory curiosity. "The park has been restored," Akano reported, placing a cup before Rias. "I flew over it on the way here. There are no signs of a battle. No craters, no scorched earth. In fact, the groundskeeper is probably going to be thrilled. The grass has never been greener. And several of the old cherry trees appear to be blooming. Out of season." The implication was clear. Naruto's intervention had not just been a combat advantage, it had been a total environmental restoration. He had erased the scars of their conflict, leaving only vigorous, impossible life in its wake. He had literally covered their tracks. "He is a terrifying existence," Kiba murmured, flexing his healed arm. "To command the battlefield itself, it's a power beyond anything I've ever conceived of." "He helped us," Issei said, finally looking up. His voice was steady, clear. "He didn't fight for us, but he helped us. He showed me I was using Didrake wrong. That we were supposed to be partners." Rias listened, her gaze fixed on the chessboard sitting on a side table. She saw the pieces, the king, the queen, the pawns. But her mind was replaying the battle, Issei's transformation, and the subtle, omniscient influence of the gardener. He had called her peerage, pieces on a board. Yet his own actions were like that of a master player, moving the board itself to his advantage. Her thoughts were interrupted by the flare of crimson light in the center of the room. The Grimoire crest burned brightly, and from it stepped Graphia Lucifuge. Her silver hair was immaculate, her maid uniform perfectly pressed. She exuded an aura of calm, icy control that could quell a riot, but today, Rias could see the faint tension in the line of her jaw. "Graphia," Rias said, rising to her feet with a respectful nod. "An unexpected visit." "Rias Ajosama," Graphia replied, her voice crisp. "Lord Searzex has been made aware of the incursion by renegade fallen angels in your territory." Her silver eyes swept over the room, taking in their exhausted states. "He has also been made aware of the unusual power signature that was instrumental in their defeat. A power that does not belong to any member of your peerage." The room went cold. The eyes of the underworld were now upon them. Upon Naruto. "He has requested a full report," Graphia continued, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "And he has summoned you to an audience in 2 days' time. He wishes to discuss the stability of your territory and the management of your assets." There was a subtle emphasis on the word, assets, that made Issei shift uncomfortably. "I understand," Rias said, her expression hardening into one of noble resolve. "I will prepare my report immediately." "See that you do," Graphia said. Just before she prepared to depart, her gaze softened for a fraction of a second. "Be cautious, Rias. Your brother is concerned." The name Kokobile was overheard by our intelligence networks in relation to the fallen who escaped. If a leader-class fallen angel is involved, this is no longer a simple territorial dispute. And this new power, An unknown king has appeared on your board. Be certain you understand its motives before you trust it. The magic circle flared, and she was gone. The weight of her words settled upon them. Kokobile, a warmonger, a monster from the Great War who was infamous for his cruelty and his hatred of both devils and God. This is bad, Akeno said, her voice losing all its playfulness. Kokobile is a nightmare. He enjoys war for its own sake. Rias walked to the window, looking out over the darkening campus of Kuo Academy. Grafia was right. She had won the battle, but she was dangerously close to losing control of the situation. She had a renegade fallen angel faction planning an invasion, her brother and the Devil Council demanding answers, and an entity of incomprehensible power living in her town. A man who refused to be an ally but had acted as their savior. She couldn't give her brother a report because she had no real answers. She didn't understand Naruto Uzumaki. Not yet. I'm going out, she announced, turning from the window. President, Kiba asked, concerned. Alone, she clarified, her gaze firm. There is something I must do. The rest of you, go home and rest. That's an order. She didn't wait for a reply. A crimson magic circle glowed at her feet, and in a swirl of demonic energy, she vanished, leaving her peerage to stare at the empty space she'd occupied. A new and unfamiliar tension hanging between them. The whispering leaf was closed. A simple wooden sign hung on the door, its letters elegantly carved, gone to tend the roots. The vibrant, life-giving aura of the shop was muted, as if the energy had been drawn inward. Rias didn't bother with the door. She teleported to the alley behind the building, arriving in the small, cluttered yard that served as Naruto's personal garden. He was there, kneeling on the ground. Several plants were laid out before him on a canvas sheet. They were the shrieking violets from his shop, their petals now a sickly bruised color, their leaves limp and dying. The ambient holy power unleashed by Cassiel, even from blocks away, had been a poison to them. Naruto was gently touching each one, a soft golden light flowing from his hand into the plant. It was a slow, painstaking process. He wasn't just healing them, he was coaxing them, pleading with their fading life force to hold on. The effort was clearly draining him. His brow was furrowed in concentration, and a thin sheen of sweat covered his temples. He was giving a part of himself to save these fragile flowers. He didn't look up as she approached. Your power leaves scars, Rias Grimori. The holy power of your enemies leaves a blight. It all poisons the soil in the end. Rias stopped a few feet away, her arms crossed. She had come prepared for a confrontation. For a negotiation, for anything but this quiet, sorrowful display. She was seeing the cost of his involvement. He had manipulated the park with casual ease, but these plants, attuned to his own life force, had suffered for it. I didn't come here to recruit you, she said, her voice softer than she intended. No, he agreed, finally setting one of the restored, pure white violets back into its pot. You came here for answers. Because the men who sit on thrones are asking you questions you can't answer. He knew. Of course, he knew. He seemed to know everything. The frustration she had felt earlier began to bubble up again. Who are you, Naruto? Really, a gardener doesn't have the kind of power you do. He doesn't have the knowledge you possess. Naruto finished with the last violet before sitting back on his heels, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw a profound weariness in his eyes, a sorrow. Oh, deep it seemed as old as the earth itself. You were right, he said. I wasn't always a gardener. He stood up, his joints popping softly. Come, there is something you should see. He led her not into the shop, but to the back of the small yard, to a dilapidated wooden shed that looked like it would collapse in a strong wind. He opened the door, revealing a dark, cramped space filled with old tools and empty bags of soil. He gestured for her to enter. Rias hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. Naruto followed, closing the door behind them, plunging them into absolute darkness. Before Rias could voice her suspicion, a soft golden light began to emanate from Naruto's hand. It wasn't a sphere or a beam, but a gentle, ambient glow that spread through the space. And the space was no longer a cramped shed. Rias gasped. They were standing in a vast greenhouse, so large she couldn't see the walls or the ceiling. The air was warm and humid, filled with the scent of alien pollens and strange, exotic blossoms. Before them stretched row after row of plants unlike anything she had ever seen. There were trees with bark that shone like polished obsidian, flowers with petals of pure, liquid light, and fungi that pulsed with a soft, rhythmic bioluminescence. It was a botanical wonderland, a living museum of a world she didn't recognize. Where are we? She breathed, her voice filled with awe. This is my home. Or what's left of it, Naruto said, his voice echoing softly in the immense space. He walked down a path between the impossible flora, his hand gently brushing against a fern that curled away from his touch like a shy animal. These are the last survivors of the elemental nations. My world. He led her to the center of the greenhouse, where a single, small sapling grew in a large, ornate pot. It looked unremarkable, with simple green leaves and a thin, woody stem. Yet the energy it radiated was immense, a deep, thrumming power that made the very air around it feel heavy. My world was different from yours, Naruto began, his gaze fixed on the sapling. We didn't have devils or angels. We had chakra, an energy born from the spirit and the body, drawn from a divine tree that was the mother of all life on our planet. We used it to perform great and terrible things. We could walk on water, breathe fire, and level mountains. We were, in our own way, gods. He touched a leaf of the sapling. But our power came at a cost. The divine tree was a parasite. It drank the very life of the planet to grow its fruit, a fruit that would grant unimaginable power to whoever ate it. Our wars, our struggles, our entire history was a long, slow battle over the right to consume our own world. We became so obsessed with the power of the fruit, we forgot about the roots. We poisoned the soil. His story was simple, told without melodrama, but Rias felt a cold dread creep into her heart. She understood now. Our final war was not between nations, but over the fate of the tree itself. It ended badly, he said, a universe of pain in those two words. The tree was destroyed, but in its death throes, it lashed out, consuming everything. All the chakra, all the life, all the souls. It drew everything back into itself, leaving behind nothing but a dead, silent rock. A graveyard world. He looked at her, his blue eyes reflecting the light of the glowing plants. I was the only one to survive. Sealed away, protected by the last vestiges of my parents' power. When I awoke, I was alone, adrift in the void between worlds, with only these seeds. The last living legacy of a world that ate itself to death. He gently cupped a leaf of the sapling. This is the last seed of that tree. The God tree. I nurture it not to regain its power, but to remember its cost. I am a gardener, Rias Grimori. Because my world died from a lack of them. I am here because the soil of your world is still fertile. And I will not stand by and watch another world poison itself. Rias was speechless. His neutrality, his power, his obsession with life, it all made a terrible, tragic sense. He wasn't a king, a god, or a player. He was a refugee, a survivor, a warden of a living graveyard, desperately trying to prevent history from repeating itself. The quiet, sacred atmosphere of the greenhouse was suddenly shattered by a sharp, discordant feeling from the outside world. Naruto's head snapped up, his expression instantly shifting from sorrowful archivist to lethal protector. A blight, he growled, his voice a low thunder. A parasite has set foot in my garden. Kiba Yuto was walking home, his mind a whirlwind. Issei's evolution, the threat of Kokobile, the memory of the holy light spears, it had all conspired to stir the embers of the hatred he kept so carefully banked within him. The Holy Sword Project, the faces of his friends, his family, dying around him, all for the sake of a madman's ambition. He clenched his fist, his knuckles white. Well, if it isn't one of the little lab rats. Still alive, I see. The voice, oily and filled with a cold, academic cruelty, stopped Kiba dead in his tracks. He turned slowly. Standing under a streetlight was a gaunt, robed man with a cruel, thin-lipped smile and eyes that gleamed with fanatical intelligence. Valpier Galilei, the monster from his nightmares. And standing next to him, giggling like a hyena, was the stray exorcist, Fried Selzen. Licking the blade of a jagged, grotesque sword that pulsed with a fractured holy light. Valpier, Kiba breathed, his vision turning red. All reason fled, replaced by a singular, burning need for vengeance. I'm going to kill you. Temper, Valpier chided, wagging a finger. That aggression is a byproduct of the process, you know. Unavoidable, but so messy. I'm merely here on behalf of my new patron, Lord Kokabeel, to collect the Excalibur fragments held in this town. We thought we might run into some of you vermin. And I get to cut 'em up. Freed shrieked, pointing his sword at Kiba. I'm gonna enjoy slicing up a pretty boy devil like you. Kiba didn't hesitate. With a roar of pure hatred, he summoned Graham and charged, a silver blur of demonic speed and righteous fury. This wasn't a strategic battle, it was raw, emotional catharsis. Freed met his charge, his movements unnaturally fast, his fractured holy sword clashing against Graham in a shower of sparks. Freed was stronger than he should have been, empowered by Valpier's experiments. Valpier watched with detached interest, as if observing a scientific experiment. You see, the fusion of a Ho-Li artifact with a compatible human host is a resounding success. Your sacrifices were not in vain, boy. They paved the way for true progress. The words were like fuel on the fire of Kiba's rage. He pushed Freed back, his swordsmanship far superior, but Freed's maniacal unpredictability and raw power made him a difficult opponent. Just as Kiba saw an opening, preparing to end the fight, a thick, thorny vine, black as night and covered in amber glowing thorns, erupted from the concrete of the sidewalk. It moved with impossible speed, a living whip that snapped through the air and wrapped Itzel around Freed's sword arm with a sickening crunch of bone. Freed screamed, a sound of agony and surprise, and his sword clattered to the ground. The vine constricted, its thorns digging into his flesh, and a faint, corrupt light was visibly siphoned from him into the vine. From the darkness of an alley, Naruto and Rias emerged. Rias's face was a mask of cold fury at the sight of the exorcists in her territory. Naruto's was something else entirely. It was a look of absolute, chilling calm. The look of a man about to remove a pest. Valpier Galilei, Naruto said, his voice quiet, yet it carried over Freed's agonized screams. A researcher who defiles the living in the name of progress. A parasite who feeds on the souls of children to create his weapons. Valpier's smug demeanor vanished, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. He could feel the power radiating from Naruto, an ancient, earthly pressure that felt like the weight of a mountain. What are you? Naruto took a step forward. The concrete at his feet cracked. Not from force, but because small, vibrant green shoots were pushing their way through it. I am the gardener, he said, his blue eyes glowing with a faint, golden light. This is my garden, and I do not suffer parasites. He raised a hand, and a dozen more vines erupted from the ground around Valpier and the screaming Freed. Valpier, for all his intelligence, Rico. Gnized, a power that operated on a level beyond his comprehension. This was not a devil or an angel. This was something primal. Retreat, he yelled. In a flash of light from a device on his wrist, and the still entangled Freed vanished in a messy, forced teleportation, leaving behind only the severed end of the vine, which withered into dust, and the lingering smell of ozone and fear. Kiba stood panting, his rage receding, leaving him shaken and cold. He looked from the spot where his tormentor had stood to Naruto, who now looked once again like a simple, unassuming man. Rias was staring at Naruto, her mind reeling. She had seen the sorrow of the survivor, and now she had seen the cold, ruthless lethality of the protector. His neutrality wasn't passive, it was a guarded peace, and he would eradicate anything that threatened it with an efficiency that was both terrifying and, she had to admit, strangely comforting. Her problems were mounting. The underworld, the fallen, and now the sea. Hercha's rogue elements were all converging on her town. But as she looked at the man who called himself a gardener, she realized she had just found the single most powerful and unpredictable factor in the entire equation. And he was standing right in the middle of her territory. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. An audience with the Devil King. The acrid smell of ozone and fear lingered in the air long after Valpier and Freed had vanished. Kiba stood trembling. Not from exertion, but from the violent collision of emotions within him. The all-consuming rage had receded, leaving behind a hollow, shaking emptiness. Vengeance, so close he could taste it, had been snatched away. But it had been snatched away by an act of such overwhelming, absolute power that it left no room for argument. Naruto's vine had already withered to dust. leaving no trace. He stood with the same infuriating calm as always, as if he'd just swatted a fly and not engaged in a supernatural conflict. He looked at Kiba, his blue eyes holding no judgment, only a quiet observation. Hate is a potent fertilizer, Naruto said, his voice soft in the sudden quiet of the street. But it only grows thorns. It poisons the soil of the soul until nothing else can grow. He then turned to Rias, who was staring at him with a look of dawning, horrified understanding. Your enemies are bringing their blight into my garden. I do not like that. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't an offer of alliance. It was a simple, ecological observation. A statement of fact. Thank you. Kiba managed to get out, the words feeling heavy and inadequate in his mouth. Naruto simply nodded, then turned and began walking back toward his shop. The roots of this town are being disturbed, he called over his shoulder. You should see to them, Rias Grimori, before the whole tree withers. Rias watched him go, the impossible weight of what she had learned in his hidden greenhouse pressing down on her. He wasn't a piece on the board, he was the gardener W. Ho owned the land the board was sitting on. And now, she had to explain his existence to a king who demanded order and control above all else. This was going to be a disaster. The journey to the underworld was instantaneous. A jarring shift in reality facilitated by the Grimori family's private transport circle. One moment they were in the familiar, lived-in comfort of the Occult Research Club room, the next. They were standing in the grand teleportation hall of the Grimori Palace. The air itself was different here. It was heavy, saturated with demonic energy so ancient and dense it felt like breathing liquid velvet. The palace was a marvel of Gothic architecture, all soaring spires and impossible arches, carved from a deep crimson stone that seemed to absorb the light. It wasn't opulent or gaudy. It was a monument to old power, a fortress built to withstand the ravages of time and war. Rias's peerage, even Akeno, seemed smaller here, their own considerable energies dwarfed by the ambient power of the place. Issei felt it most of all. He could feel Didraig stirring in his gauntlet, a low, respectful hum in the presence of such concentrated demonic might. The seat of a pillar, the dragon's voice rumbled in his mind. This place has stood for millennia. Tread carefully, partner. The politics here are more dangerous than any battlefield. Issei nodded silently, his usual boisterous energy completely suppressed. The talk with Naruto, the fight with the Fallen, and the harmony with Didraig had changed him. He understood, now, that power wasn't something to be shouted about. It was something to be held, controlled, and respected. Graphia was waiting for them, her expression as unreadable as polished silver. Lord Searzex will see you now, she announced, her voice echoing in the cavernous hall. Follow me. She led them through corridors so vast their footsteps seemed to be swallowed by the silence. They passed stern-faced guards in Grimori armor and portraits of Kree. MSON-haired ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow them with unnerving intensity. Finally, they arrived before a set of massive, ornate doors that swung open silently at their approach. The audience Amber was not a throne room in the traditional sense. It was a vast, circular chamber, the ceiling a swirling vortex of crimson and black energy that mimicked a night sky. In the center of the room, standing before a simple, unadorned dais, was Searzex Lucifer. He wore the formal robes of a devil king, but his posture was relaxed. A gentle, welcoming smile was on his face, yet the pressure emanating from him was immense. It was the calm, crushing weight of an ocean. This was not Rias's playful older brother, this was one of the most powerful beings in existence. Standing to one side was Seraphal Leviathan, another of the four great Satans. She was dressed in her magical girl costume, a ridiculously cheerful splash of pink and white in the somber chamber, but her eyes were sharp and missed nothing. Rias, Searzex said, his voice warm but carrying an undeniable authority. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Rias bowed deeply, her peerage following suit. Brother, Lord Leviathan, you summoned me. Indeed, Searzex said, his smile fading slightly. I have read the preliminary report regarding the fallen angel incursion. It is troubling. Cassiel is a known subordinate of Kokobile. If he is moving openly, it means Kokobile is planning something significant. We will deal with that threat accordingly. His gaze then shifted, moving from Rias to each of her servants before finally settling on Issei. However, The more pressing matter is the other anomaly in your report. The being known as Naruto Uzumaki. The name hung in the air, heavy and strange. Your report Desker. IBES him as possessing an unprecedented power over life itself. A power that neutralized a high-level stray with ease, manipulated a battlefield on a conceptual level, and was instrumental in your pawn achieving balance breaker. Sears recounted, his tone even. Yet you list him as human. You will elaborate. Now, taking a deep breath, Rias began. She chose her words with the care of a diplomat navigating a minefield. She described Naruto's simple life, his refusal to join her peerage, and his stated desire to remain neutral. She framed his interventions not as alliances, but as the actio NS of a territorial being defending his home from invasive species. She detailed the encounter with Valpier and Freed, emphasizing that Naruto acted only when the church renegades appeared, a direct blight on the town. When she finished, there was a long silence. Serafal tapped her magical scepter against the floor thoughtfully. So he's like a super powerful janitor. So cool, she chirped, though her eyes remained serious. Sears's gaze, however, remained on Issei. Issei Hyodo, my sister claims this man's influence is why you were able to manifest your scale mail. Explain. Issei felt the weight of that gaze. The full attention of the Devil King. He felt a flicker of his old nervousness, but Diedrag's calm, steady presence in his mind was a rock. Speak the truth, partner. Plain and simple, this man does not value deception. My lord, Issei began, his voice surprisingly steady. Naruto, he didn't give me power. He told me I was using it wrong. I was treating Diedrag like a weapon. A tool. He said I was a warden. Not a partner. He held up his left hand. He gave me a token, a seed of perception, he called it. It helped me listen to Diedrag, to my friends. It helped us synchronize. The power was always there. He just showed me the right way to turn the key. This was not the answer Sears was expecting. He had anticipated a story of a ritual, a power transfer, a Faustian bargain. This talk of perspective and harmony was far more complex, and far more concerning. It implied a level of wisdom and understanding of the sacred systems that no mere gardener should possess. Before Sears could press the issue, a new voice, laced with condescending arrogance, echoed through the chamber. A touching story. The pet dragon learned a new trick. How quaint. From the shadows near the chamber's edge, a tall, powerfully built devil stepped forward. He had sharp, aristocratic features, slicked back black hair, and eyes the color of cold obsidian. He was dressed in immaculate, old-style noble attire. This was Lord Malachor of the House of Glacia Labelas, a political rival to the Grimoire clan and a staunch traditionalist. He bowed, a gesture that was more mockery than respect. Lord Lucifer, Lord Leviathan, forgive my intrusion, but I felt compelled to speak. I have reviewed Lady Grimoire's report, and I find it to be the most alarming document I have read in a century. Your concern is noted, Lord Malachor, Sears said, his tone turning dangerously smooth. Please, enlighten us. Malachor circled the Grimoire peerage like a shark, his gaze filled with contempt. Rias Grimoire was given stewardship of a peaceful, strategically important town. In a matter of months, it has become a nest for renegade fallen, a target for stray exorcists, and now, the home of an entity of godlike power that she admits she cannot control. He gestured dismissively at Rias. She has lost control of her territory. She comes to you not with a report of a victory, but a confession of her own incompetence. Rias's hands clenched into fists, her demonic energy flaring, but a single, sharp look from Sears quelled it. And this being, this gardener, Malachor spat the word like a curse. He is a power that exists outside of our laws, our hierarchy. He answers to no one. Today, he helps a Grimoire. Tomorrow, might he decide that we are the blight that needs to be purged from the soil. An unknown king is not a curiosity, it is a declaration of war. He must be either brought to heel or eradicated before his roots grow too deep. He stopped and faced Sears, his final proposal delivered with cold, calculated precision. It is clear that Lady Grimoire is out of her depth. I propose that my own peerage, battle-hardened and loyal to the established order, be dispatched to Kuo. We will assist in securing the territory, and we will properly investigate this Naruto Uzumaki. We will force him to declare his allegiance, or we will force him into oblivion. The power grab was blatant. A direct challenge to the Grimoire's prestige. Rias's peerage bristled, ready to defend their king's honor, but the decision rested solely with Circex. The Devil King was silent for a long moment. His gentle expression unreadable. He understood the politics at play. Malicor's words were venomous, but his point was valid. An uncontrollable power of this magnitude could not be ignored. Finally, he spoke. Lord Malicor, your dedication to the stability of the underworld is commendable. His gaze shifted to Rias, and for a moment, she saw the supportive brother beneath the weary king. However, Kuo town was assigned to the House of Grimoire. It will remain under their stewardship. I have faith in my sister's ability to manage her own territory. Malicor's face tightened, but he said nothing. Rias felt a wave of relief, but it was premature. However, Circex continued, his voice losing all warmth, replaced by the unyielding authority of a monarch. Lord Malicor's concerns are not without merit. This Naruto Uzumaki cannot remain an unknown. We require an assessment. We must understand his origins, the nature of his power, and his intentions. He looked directly at Rias, his crimson eyes pinning her in place. Rias, this is a direct order from your king. You are to bring this man to me. Here, for a formal audience. You have 2 days to ensure his compliance. The words struck Rias with the force of a physical blow. It was an impossible task. She had seen Naruto's home, heard his story. He was a survivor of a dead world who wanted nothing more than to be left alone. He bowed to no king, served no master. The idea of him meekly accepting a summons to the underworld was laughable. Forcing him was unthinkable. It would be a declaration of war against AB. Angu could turn a city into a forest with a whim. But to refuse an order from her king, her brother, in front of a political rival, it would be an admission of failure. It would mean the end of her authority in Kuo. The disgrace of her name. She was trapped, caught between the immovable object and the unstoppable force. Slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the chamber, Rias Grimoire bowed her head. I understand, my lord, she said, her voice a strained whisper. It will be done. Miles away, in a ruined, desecrated church on the outskirts of Kuo, Kokubile lounged on a makeshift throne of broken pews. A bored expression on his handsome face. Before him knelt Valpier and a whimpering, heavily bandaged Freed. So, Kokubile said, his voice a lazy drawl. The Grimoire whelp has a new dog. And this one has a very loud bark. And Kiba Yuto, one of Valpier's pet projects, is still alive. And you were both sent scurrying away by a gardener. He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that held no humor. This town is becoming more amusing by the minute. My lord, this was no mere human. Valpier insisted, his voice trembling. His power was primal, an earthly dominion I have never witnessed. He commanded the very ground we stood on. Kokubile waved a dismissive hand. Yes, yes, very dramatic. Another anomaly in a town full of them. He stood up and walked to a large, gaping hole in the church wall. Looking out at the distant lights of Kuo, 4 figures stood in the shadows behind him, each radiating an immense, holy power. They were the wielders of the stolen Excalibur swords. It matters not, Kokubile said, a wide, manic grin spreading across his face. Let the devils have their little political squabbles. Let the gardener tend his soil. The pieces are in place. The curtain is about to rise. His grin widened, showing a hint of madness in his eyes. It's time to start a war. And this time, I'll make sure it's the last one this world ever sees. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Unmovable Root. The return to the human world was a nauseating lurch. One moment, they were in the crushing, ancient grandeur of the Grimoire Palace. The next, they were back in the Occult Research Club room. The familiar scent of old books and Akanos a jarring contrast to the oppressive demonic ore they had just left behind. The silence they brought with them, however, was just as heavy. It was a silence filled with the unspoken weight of Cirzex's impossible command. Rias walked immediately to the window, her back to her peerage. She stared out at the setting sun painting the Kuo Academy grounds in hues of orange and purple, but she saw none of it. Her mind was a tempest, replaying the audience, the cold condescension in Malicor's eyes, and the final, unyielding order from her brother. "So, what's the plan, President?" Issei asked, his voice quiet, devoid of its usual bombast. The new harmony with Diedreg had given him a deeper perception, and he could feel the waves of despair rolling off his king. "There is no plan," Rias said, her voice flat, brittle. "There are no good options. I have been ordered to bring him to the underworld. He has made it explicitly clear that he serves no one and will not be summoned. If I ask him, he will refuse. If I try to force him, a war with a being who can command life itself is not a war we would win." She finally turned, her face a mask of weary frustration. "And if I fail, I will be admitting incompetence. Malicor will be proven right. My authority here will be stripped away, and his butchers will be sent to secure the town. They will provoke Naruto, and the result will be the same. A war. Every path leads to disaster." Akino placed a comforting hand on Rias's shoulder. "We will find a way, Rias. We always do." But, even her voice lacked its usual confidence. She knew, better than anyone, the rigid politics of the underworld. An order from a Satan was absolute. Defiance was political suicide. "It's my fault," Kiba said, his head bowed. He was sitting on the arm of the sofa, his hands clenched. "My quest for vengeance brought Valpier here. It escalated the situation. If I had just stayed focused on my duties." "No, Kiba," Rias cut him off, her voice softening. "This was inevitable. A power like Naruto's could not remain hidden forever. Your encounter merely accelerated the timeline." She sank into her chair, the weight of her crown, both literal and metaphorical, pressing down on her. "I am the king. The responsibility is mine, and I am failing." For the first time since they had known her, the peerage of Rias Grimori saw a crack in her armor. They saw not the confident heiress, but a young woman trapped by duty, loyalty, and a political game she was destined to lose. Issei looked at the others, at Kiba's guilt, Akino's worry, Kaniko's silent concern. He felt the echo of Naruto's words in his mind. A king's greatest strength is not her own power, but the power of her pieces working in harmony. "No, you're not," Issei said, his voice ringing with a conviction that made everyone look at him. "You're trying to solve this alone. That's what got us into trouble in the park. You're the king, but we're your peerage. Your family. So, what are we going to do?" Rias looked at him, startled by his sudden, unshakable resolve. She saw the unwavering loyalty in his eyes, and in the eyes of her other servants as they nodded in agreement. A tiny spark of warmth ignited in the cold dread of her heart. She wasn't alone. That, at least, was a truth she could hold on to. "First," she said, her voice regaining a sliver of its usual command, "I will speak to him. Not as a king issuing a summons, but as myself. I will explain the situation. I will lay our cards on the table. It is the only path that respects who he is. The rest, we will face when it comes." She found him not at his shop, but in the secluded forest clearing from her first investigation. The air here was even more vibrant than in his store, humming with a raw, untamed life force. He was kneeling in the center of the clearing, his eyes closed, his palms flat against the earth, just as he had been when he'd revived the lunar orchid. He seemed to be in a trance, a silent communion with the world itself. The very ground around him seemed to breathe in time with him. Rias landed softly a dozen yards away, her devil wings vanishing in a flicker of red light. She didn't approach immediately, suddenly feeling like an intruder in a sacred space. This was his church, his sanctuary. She waited. After a long moment, he sighed, a sound like the wind rustling through leaves, and opened his eyes. He didn't seem surprised to see her. "You've brought the scent of your underworld with you," he said, his voice distant. "It clings to you like soot. A place of old power and older regrets. It does not smell of fertile soil." He stood up, brushing dirt from his knees. "I have just returned from an audience with my brother, Searsex Lucifer," she began, choosing to be direct. There was no point in pretense with a man who could likely feel the truth in the vibrations of her soul. "The king of the devils," Naruto stated, not as a question, but as a simple identification, like naming a species of tree. "He is powerful. His energy is vast, but it feels tired. Like a great river that has been dammed for too long." The casual, and unnervingly accurate assessment of one of the most powerful beings in existence left Rias momentarily speechless. She pressed on. He knows about you. He is concerned. He does not understand what you are. And that which the powerful do not understand, they fear. And that which they fear, they seek to control. As I told you, Naruto said with a shrug. The games of kings. It's more than a game, Rias insisted. Taking a step closer. The desperation she had been holding back began to leak into her voice. He has given me a direct order. I am to bring you to the underworld for an audience. He wishes to assess you. Naruto's expression did not change, but a sudden stillness fell over the clearing. The gentle hum of life seemed to quiet, holding its breath. The air grew heavy. And what did you tell him? Naruto asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I told him I would comply, she admitted, the words tasting like ash. I had no choice. To refuse would be to forfeit my position, my home, my entire world. She watched him, her heart pounding. She was expecting anger, a flash of the cold lethality she had seen when he dealt with Valpyr. Instead, his expression softened into one of profound disappointment. So you would bring me, in chains if you had to this king of yours. So that he can categorize me? He asked. So he can place me in one of his little boxes. Decide if I am a threat or an asset. Is that what you think of me, Rias Grimori? Am I just another exotic plant to be potted and placed in your brother's collection? No, she said, the word exploding from her with more force than she intended. That's not it at all. That's why I came here. To tell you that I cannot, and will not, force you. I came to warn you. My brother will not let this go. If I fail, he will send others. People like Malachor, who will not ask, who will not care about your garden or your principles. They will come with fire and iron, and they will try to rip you out of the ground by the roots. She stood before him, vulnerable, her soul laid bare. She had just committed treason against her brother, her king, for the sake of this man, this impossible gardener. Naruto studied her for a long moment, his blue eyes searching her face. The pressure in the clearing receded. The birds started to sing again. You would sacrifice your position for me? He asked, a genuine note of curiosity in his voice. Why? I am not your ally. I am not your servant. I have offered you nothing. Because it's the right thing to do, she said, her voice filled with a passion that surprised even herself. Because you are not a thing to be controlled. Because you deserve to be left in peace. And because, she trailed off, unable to articulate the last part. Because you saved us. Because you saved Issei. Because you showed me there is a power greater than destruction. He held her gaze, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. It was a respect forged in the fires of their encounters. An acknowledgement of two diametrically opposed powers finding a strange, unexpected balance. My answer is no, Naruto said, his voice firm but not unkind. I will not be summoned. I will not be judged by a king whose power is rooted in decay. My life is my own. He then gave her a small, sad smile. You have made your choice, Rias Grimori. You have chosen to protect a single, stubborn root. Even if it means the branch that supports you will break. That is the choice of a gardener, not a queen. I respect that. A strange sense of peace settled over Rias. She had made her choice. The consequences would be dire. But her conscience was clear. She had upheld her own principles over the orders of her king. But the world did not care for principles. The world cared only for power. And just then, the world screamed. It wasn't a sound, but a feeling. A violent, sickening lurch in the fabric of reality. A wave of immense, corrupt holy power washed over the town, centered directly on Kuo Academy. The sky, which had been a peaceful twilight, was suddenly covered by a shimmering, purple-black dome of energy. A barrier, a massive, high-level isolation field that sealed the entire Academy grounds off from the rest of the world. Naruto's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a sudden, blazing fury. The disappointment, the calm, the respect, it was all gone, burned away by a cold, primordial rage. A barrier, Rias breathed, her blood running cold. Her peerage was still at the school. Kiba, Kaneko, Akano, Asia, Issei. Naruto didn't look at her. His gaze was fixed on the shimmering dome in the distance. He held up a hand, and a flower in the clearing, a delicate white blossom, instantly withered, its petals turning black and crumbling to dust. This power, he growled, his voice a low rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself. It is not just a cage. It is a poison. It is actively killing the life within it. Every tree, every blade of grass, every living thing inside that dome is being slowly strangled. He is salting the very earth. This was not a strategic move to him. This was a blasphemy, an act of ultimate desecration. Inside the Occult Research Club room, the world had turned purple. The barrier had descended without warning, and the peerage was instantly on high alert. It's a high-level isolation field, Akano said, her hands already crackling with lightning as she pressed them against the shimmering wall where a window used to be. My magic is being repelled. We're trapped. Rias and Naruto are outside, Kiba noted, his hand on Graham. But we're in here, with the entire student body. A loud, mocking laugh echoed from a magic circle that flared to life in the center of the room. From it stepped Fried Selzen, his arm in a crude sling, his eyes gleaming with manic glee. Beside him stood Valpierre Galilei, a cold, triumphant smile on his face. Welcome, little devils, Fried shrieked, waving a light-based gun erratically, to the first official performance of the Kokobile War Memorial Theater. Tonight's show, the complete and utter annihilation of the Grimoire and Citri peerages. Outside, on the school grounds, 4 figures appeared in flashes of light. Zenobia Quarta and Irina Shido, the church's dispatched sword-wielders, found themselves back-to-back, their Excalibur fragments drawn as they were suddenly surrounded by figures in dark robes. It's a trap, Zenobia yelled, parrying a blow from a massive, hulking man wielding the Excalibur destruction. Sona Citri and her entire peerage emerged from the student council building, their expressions grim as they took in the purple sky and the sudden appearance of robed enemies. The battle for Kuo Academy had begun. Back in the forest clearing, Rias was frantically trying to use a communication circle to contact her peerage, but the barrier was blocking all magical frequencies. She was locked out. Her family was trapped inside with their enemies. She turned to Naruto, a desperate plea on her lips, but stopped. He was no longer looking at the barrier. He was looking at his hand, where he held a single, gnarled, lifeless-looking seed. They seek to create a dead zone, he whispered, his voice dangerously calm, a place where nothing can grow. They do this in the heart of my garden. He closed his hand around the seed. An intense, golden light, brighter and more potent than anything Rias had ever seen him use, flared between his fingers. It was not the gentle, nurturing light of a gardener, it was the incandescent fury of a creator seeing his creation defiled. I cannot allow this, he said. He opened his hand. The seed was gone. In his palm rested a single, perfect, emerald green leaf. It pulsed with a life force so immense it made Rias's very bones ache. Your political problems no longer matter, Rias Grimoire, Naruto said, finally meeting her gaze. His eyes were glowing, 2 pools of molten gold. A blight has come, and it is my duty to purge it. He didn't wait for her. He didn't offer an alliance. He simply acted. He took a single step, and the ground around him erupted, not with vines, but with massive, gnarled roots that tore through the earth. They didn't attack, they flowed, moving like a great river, carrying him on their surface with impossible speed directly toward the besieged academy. He was riding a tidal wave of pure, untamed life, a force of nature moving to eradicate a poison. Rias stared after him, her heart caught between terror and a strange, breathtaking awe. Her impossible choice had been rendered moot. Her political crisis was over. The war had just begun. And she was on the outside, looking in. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Gardener's Wrath. The world inside the barrier was dying. It was a slow, suffocating death. A creeping poison that leached the color from the grass and choked the life from the leaves on the trees. The air was thin and tasted of ozone and sterile magic, a stark contrast to the vibrant, living world that had existed only moments before. This was Kokobile's stage, and he had set it with a scenery of creeping entropy. Inside the Occult Research Club room, the purple gloom was thick with the scent of Fried Selzen's madness. He giggled, a high, unhinged sound that scraped at the nerves, waving his light gun around with a performer's theatricality. Valpierre Galilei stood beside him, a silent, approving spectator to the chaos. Now, devils, Fried chirped, his eyes wide and bloodshot. Don't look so glum. You've got front row seats to the end of the world. Or, at least, the end of your pathetic little town. It's gonna be a blast. Issei stepped forward, placing himself in front of Asia, who had shrunk back in fear. His boosted gear materialized on his arm, glowing with a steady, reassuring crimson light. He could feel Diedrag's calm, immense presence settling over him, a stark contrast to his own racing heart. The mad dog and the disgraced scientist, Diedrag's voice rumbled in his mind. This is the opening act. Do not be baited by the fool, Issei. The true threat is the one who watches from the wings. Issei gave a mental nod. He felt Kiba and Kaneko take up positions flanking him. The three of them formed a solid, unbreachable wall. You talk too much, Kaneko stated, her voice flat, her golden eyes fixed on Fried with the predatory stillness of a cat about to pounce. On the main school grounds, the battle was a whirlwind of desperate, chaotic skirmishes. Sona Citri and her peerage moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine, their coordinated attack. A textbook example of devil combat strategy. But they were outnumbered. Dozens of robed figures, rogue exorcists and conjured magical beasts, swarmed the campus, their sheer numbers overwhelming the student council's meticulous formations. Saji, Sona's pawn, was a whirlwind of Vritra's absorption lines, but for every enemy he ensnared, two more took its place. Tsubaki Shinra, her mirror Alice reflecting a barrage of light spears, was being slowly forced back. Elsewhere, Xenovia Quarta moved like a tempest of destruction. Durandal, the holy sword of destruction, was a blur of blue and silver light in her hands, each swing obliterating a conjured beast or sending a rogue exorcist flying. She fought with a brutal, righteous fury, a warrior of God beset by heretics. Irina Shido was her perfect complement, her Excalibur mimic taking the form of a swift, light rope that disarmed and entangled opponents, her movements filled with an acrobatic grace. But they too were surrounded. A tall, GR.IM-faced man wielding the massive Excalibur destruction met Xenovia's every blow, the clash of the holy sword sending shockwaves that cracked the very pavement. High above it all, perched on the show, All's clock tower like a malevolent gargoyle, Kokobile watched the chaos unfold. A lazy, entertained smile played on his lips. This was art. The screams, the explosions of holy and demonic energy, the desperation of the young devils and the cornered warriors of the church, it was a symphony of destruction, and he was its conductor. Beautiful, he murmured to himself, his 10 black wings fanning out behind him in a display of immense, arrogant power. Let them struggle, let them despair, it will make the grand finale all the sweeter. His amusement was interrupted by a faint tremor. It wasn't from an explosion. It was a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to come from the earth itself. He frowned, his gaze sweeping over his perfectly crafted battlefield. The ground was vibrating. Down below, Issei felt it too. It was a low hum that he could feel in the soles of his feet, a feeling that cut through the noise of Fried's maniacal laughter. He glanced at Kiba, who nodded, his own enhanced senses picking it up as well. Then, the barrier screamed. The purple dome that had seemed so absolute, so unbreachable, began to flicker. A single point on its surface, near the edge of the forest, began to warp and distort. It looked as if something was pushing against it from the outside, something immense and irresistible. The purple energy sizzled and hissed, trying to hold its form, but it was like a sheet of paper trying to hold back the tide. Kokobile's smile vanished. He stood up, his full attention now fixed on the anomaly. What is this? He growled. What is interfering with my stage? A single, thick root, glowing with a soft golden light, punched through the barrier. It was followed by another, and then a dozen more. They weren't attacking the barrier, they were eating it. The corrupt holy energy was being drained, absorbed, siphoned away into the roots, which grew thicker and more vibrant with every passing second. The barrier, a masterpiece of fallen angel magic, was being consumed like fertilizer. With a final, agonizing groan, a massive section of the dome dissolved, not into nothingness, but into a shower of golden motes of life that rained down on the school grounds. Through the newly opened hole, under the now visible twilight sky, a figure appeared. Naruto Uzumaki rode a tidal wave of living wood, a torrent of interwoven roots that carried him forward with the implacable force of a glacier. He stood calmly on the crest of the wave, his hands in his pockets, his expression one of cold, righteous fury. The wave of roots didn't stop at the barrier's edge. It flowed onto the school grounds. A silent, green tsunami that began to spread across the campus. Rias, standing at the edge of the forest, watched in breathless awe. She was close enough to feel the raw, untamed power rolling off him. This was not the gentle gardener who tended to sick flowers. This was a primordial force of nature, awakened and enraged. The effect was instantaneous. Where the golden motes from the shattered barrier fell, and where the roots spread, the dying, purple-tinged grass was instantly revitalized, turning a lush, vibrant green. The wilting trees straightened, their leaves regaining their color. The very air changed, the sterile, poisonous tang of the barrier replaced by the rich, clean scent of damp earth and blooming life. Naruto wasn't just breaking the barrier. He was healing the world it had wounded. Who the hell is that? Freed shrieked from the club room, his manic glee replaced by confused outrage. He ruined the mood lighting. Naruto didn't seem to even notice the main combatants. His focus was entirely on the robed grunts, the conjured beasts, the weeds, infesting his garden. The wave of roots split into thousands of smaller tendrils that shot across the campus with intelligent, terrifying precision. Sona Citri, who had been on the verge of ordering a strategic retreat, watched in stunned silence as a root shot past her and wrapped itself not around a rogue exorcist, but around his ankle, tripping him. Before he could get up, the ground beneath him softened, and his legs sank into the earth up to his knees, holding him fast. A moment later, a small, vibrant red poppy bloomed next to his head, releasing a puff of shimmering pollen. The exorcist's eyes glazed over, and he slumped into a deep, peaceful sleep. All across the campus, the same scene was repeated. The battle turned into a systematic, non-lethal cleanup. Enemies were not killed, they were incapacitated. Vines dropped from trees to ensnare them. The ground itself would rise up to form earthen manacles. Clouds of sleep-inducing pollen from newly bloomed flowers drifted through the air, putting dozens of the lesser foes to sleep. It was an act of pest control on a scale so vast and so precise it was utterly humbling. From his perch, Kokobile watched, his initial confusion curdling into pure, incandescent rage. This interloper was ruining everything. He was dismantling his army, healing his stage, undoing his beautiful work with an effortless disdain that was the ultimate insult. Insolent gnat, he roared, his voice booming across the campus. He launched himself from the clock tower, 10 black wings carrying him like a vengeful god toward Naruto. You dare to interfere with the plans of Kokobile. Naruto finally stopped his advance, the wave of roots coming to a halt in the center of the main courtyard. He looked up at the descending fallen angel, his expression still one of cold, dispassionate anger. He raised a single hand. The ground between them erupted. A massive wall of interwoven wood and stone, 30 feet high, shot out of the earth, forcing Kokobile to swerve. It wasn't an attack, it was a barrier. A dismissal, as if Naruto was telling the fallen angel to wait his turn. Naruto's gaze then swept across the battlefield, his eyes finally landing on the remaining pockets of conflict. He saw Kiba, driven by his rage, pressing a furious assault on Valpier, who was protected by a shimmering personal shield. He saw Xenovia and the Excalibur destruction wielder locked in a brutal, earth-shattering stalemate. He sighed, a sound of weary annoyance. So many weeds. Inside the clubroom, Freed, seeing his master finally joining the fray, decided to get serious. Time to die, devil scum, he yelled, leveling his light gun at Issei. But before he could fire, the wooden floorboards of the club room exploded upwards. A single, thick vine shot out and wrapped itself around Freed's gun, crushing the weapon into a twisted lump of metal. Another vine ensnared his legs, hoisting him upside down into the air. Hey, no fair, get me down from here, he squawked, struggling uselessly. Valper's eyes widened in scientific fascination and terror. Remarkable, he can control any plant life, even processed wood. His observation was cut short as his own shield flickered and died. A small, delicate green shoot had pushed its way through a crack in the floor and was now wrapped around the projector on his wrist, draining its energy. Now, Issei, Kiba yelled, seeing the opening. Issei didn't need to be told. He had been gathering power, not in a massive, uncontrolled surge, but in a tight, focused sphere at the tip of his gauntlet. Steady, partner. Focus on the target, not the building, Didrag coached. Dragon shot. Issei roared, but it wasn't the wide, destructive beam he'd used before. It was a condensed, pencil-thin laser of draconic energy that lanced across the room and struck Valpier square in the chest. The scientist was thrown back against the wall, his robes scorched, unconscious before he even hit the floor. Outside, the user of Excalibur destruction found his feet suddenly rooted to the spot by thick, thorny vines. He roared in frustration, trying to tear himself free, but they held him like iron. It was the only opening Xenovia needed. With a battle cry, she lunged forward, the full, destructive power of Durandal crashing down on the holy sword. Excalibur destruction, unable to be moved to properly parry, shattered into 1,000 pieces of light. Its wielder, caught in the backlash, was thrown back, defeated. Naruto lowered his hand. The grunts were all neutralized. The sub-bosses were dealt with by the others. The garden was cleaner. Now, he could finally deal with the source of the blight. The massive wall he had created crumbled back into the earth as if it had never been. On the other side, Kokobile hovered, his face a mask of pure, murderous fury. All around them, the remaining members of the Grimoire and Citri peerages, along with Xenovia and Irina, watched, having ceased their own battles. They were no longer participants. They were spectators. I do not know what you are, Kokobile snarled, his voice dripping with venom. Some lost nature spirit, an errant god. It does not matter. You have made a fatal error. You have made an enemy of the one being who could have brought this stagnant world the glorious gift of a new war. Quote, he raised his hands, and a spear of holy light, so large and so dense it seemed to tear a hole in reality itself, formed above him. Its power dwarfed anything Cassiel had produced. It was an attack meant to wipe a city off the map. Naruto looked up at the apocalyptic weapon, then back at Kokobile. He finally spoke, his voice calm and clear, carrying across the silent courtyard to every listener. You talk of war and destruction, Naruto said, his voice devoid of emotion. You come into a place of life, a place of growth, and you seek to poison it for your own amusement. You are not a warrior. You are a blight, a pestilence. He slowly raised his own hand. He wasn't gathering energy. He was requesting it. The entire campus seemed to respond. The Gra SS glowed with a brilliant emerald light. The trees hummed with power. The very soil thrummed with an ancient, immeasurable energy. All of it, the life force of the entire school grounds, flowed towards Naruto, drawn to him. Coalescing in his palm not as a weapon of light or fire, but as a simple, unassuming seed made of pure, solidified life. And Naruto finished, his voice dropping to a whisper. For that was somehow more terrifying than any shout, I'm the gardener. He flicked the seed with his thumb. It shot upwards, a tiny green speck against the massive, world-ending spear of light. It made like the most futile gesture imaginable. But as the seed touched the spear, it did not shatter. It sprouted. In an instant, a colossal tree, larger than any skyscraper, erupted from the point of impact. Its roots, glowing with golden light, wrapped around the spear of holy energy, consuming it, devouring its power in a fraction of a second. Its branches, covered in vibrant green leaves, spread out across the sky, momentarily eclipsing the moon. For a single, breathtaking moment, the world tree itself seemed to have been reborn in the skies above Kuo Academy. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the tree imploded, collapsing in on itself until it was nothing more than a shower of harmless green leaves that drifted down onto the stunned and silent battlefield. Kokobile stared, his jaw hanging open, his mind unable to process what had just happened. His ultimate attack, a power that could have challenged a devil king, had been neutralized, eaten, and turned into a light show by a seed. Before he could recover, a single root, no thicker than his wrist, shot up from the ground and gently tapped him on the forehead. And Kokobile, the fearsome warmonger of the Great War, the nigh-invincible leader class fallen angel, simply fell. He dropped out of the sky like a stone, his eyes rolled back in his head, completely unconscious, a small, peaceful-looking flower blooming in his hair where the root had touched him. He landed with a dull thud in the newly revitalized grass. Silence. Absolute, profound, and disbelieving silence descended upon Kuo Academy. Rias, watching from the edge of it all, felt her knees go weak. She had just witnessed a being of godlike power defeat one of the most dangerous terrorists in the world without taking a single step, without throwing a single punch. And with all the emotional investment of a man pulling a stubborn weed from his lawn. Her mission to bring him to the underworld was no longer just impossible. It was the single most ridiculous, laughable, and suicidal idea she had ever heard in her entire life. Her brother didn't need to assess Naruto Uzumaki. He needed to pray that Naruto Uzumaki never decided to assess him. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Price of a Harvest. The silence that followed Kokobeel's defeat was a fragile, crystalline thing. It was a silence born not of peace, but of collective, system-shocking disbelief. Devils, church warriors, and student council members alike stood frozen, their gazes fixed on the unconscious form of the legendary warmonger, a ridiculous little flower still blooming jauntily in his hair. The architect of the entire crisis, a being who had threatened to plunge the world into a new great war, had been felled with a single, gentle tap. Naruto stood in the center of the courtyard, the immense, world-shaking power he had commanded already receding, flowing back into the earth. The golden glow in his eyes faded, leaving them their normal, deep blue. He looked down at the fallen Kokobeel, not with triumph, but with a quiet, weary finality. The blight had been purged. The garden was safe. Slowly, as if awakening from a trance, the various combatants began to move. Sona Citri, her usual unflappable composure completely shattered, pushed her glasses up her nose with a trembling hand. Analysis. The hostile entity has been neutralized by an unknown third party using an UNP. Recedented biological-based power system. Probability of success against said third party, incalculable. Her voice was a clipped, robotic monotone, the only way her mind could process the sheer scale of what she had just witnessed. Zenobia Quarta stood with Durandal's tip resting on the ground, her knuckles white. As a warrior of the church, she was trained to recognize and combat overwhelming power. She had been prepared to die fighting Kokobeel. But this was not a power she could comprehend. It was not holy, not demonic, not draconic. It was other. It was the power of the world itself, given a form and a will. Is he an emissary of God? Irina Shido whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of terror and awe. Did God send a servant of Eden to protect this place? No angel of the Lord fights like that. Zenobia countered, her voice low and tense. That was something else entirely. Something older. From the now splintered door of the Occult Research Club, Issei and the others emerged. They saw the peaceful, sleeping grunts, the unconscious Valpier and Freed, and the defeated Kokobeel. They saw Naruto standing alone in the center of it all. Issei felt Didrake's presence in his mind. A low thrum of profound, ancient respect. In all my long millennia, the dragon's voice was heavy with wonder. I have never seen its equal. Not Michael's grace, nor the old Lucifer's fury. He did not destroy his enemy. He unmade him. He commanded life to reclaim that which was forfeit. Rias was the first to approach. She moved slowly, cautiously, as one might approach a dormant volcano. The others followed her lead. A loose, uncertain semicircle forming around Naruto and his harvest. Naruto, Rias began, but she didn't know how to finish. Thank you. What have you done? Who are you? None of the questions felt adequate. Naruto didn't look at her. He knelt beside Kokobeel's unconscious form. He placed a hand on the fallen angel's chest, not in a gesture of healing, but of assessment. A faint golden light flowed from his palm. His life force is a tangled mess of stolen light and ancient hatred, Naruto murmured, his voice distant, analytical. He is a walking corruption. Leaving him like this would be like leaving a diseased root in the ground. It would only fester and poison the soil again. Before anyone could react or ask what he meant, a flash of brilliant white light illuminated the entire courtyard. A massive, intricate magic circle, one that pulsed with a power far greater than any devil's, appeared in the sky above them. From it, a single figure descended, riding a chariot of pure white light drawn by 4 majestic white horses. The figure was clad in shining silver armor, and 12 massive, feathered white wings fanned out behind him, bathing the entire campus in a gentle, holy aura. It was Michael, the leader of the Seraphim, the acting head of heaven in God's absence. And he was not alone. From a separate, crimson magic circle that flared to life on the ground, 2 figures emerged. One was Searzek's Lucifer, his usual calm smile replaced by an expression of grim urgency. The other was the silver-haired Valkyrie, Rosweiss, her fac. Pale with shock as she took in the scene. The sudden arrival of the leaders of 2 of the 3 great factions sent a fresh wave of shock through the already stunned onlookers. They had come expecting to find a war zone, a leveled town. Instead, they found a peacefully sleeping army, a defeated war criminal, and a gardener kneeling over his prize. Kokobile, Searzek breathed, his crimson eyes wide as he took in the scene. He looked from his sister and her peerage, to the sea-tree peerage, to the unconscious fallen angel, and finally, to the blond man kneeling beside him, the epicenter of this impossible event. His senses, honed by eons of existence, were screaming at him. The sheer density of the life force in this area, in this man, was beyond anything he had ever encountered. It was trying to measure the ocean with a teacup. Michael's chariot landed softly. He stepped out, his expression one of serene, sorrowful authority. His gaze, however, was also drawn to Naruto. The reports of a disturbance were understated. The seraph said, his voice a chorus of harmonious tones. We came prepared for war, but it seems the battle is already over. Searzek ignored the seraph for a moment, his focus entirely on Rias. Rias, are you and your peerage unharmed? He asked, his voice tight with concern. We are, brother, Rias replied, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. Thanks to him, she gestured towards Naruto. All eyes in the courtyard, devil, angel, and human, were now fixed on the gardener. The leaders of heaven and the underworld had arrived, yet he seemed completely unconcerned. He was still focused on the unconscious Kokobile. I will take custody of this one, Michael announced, his voice gentle but firm. He is a traitor to heaven. His crimes are ours to judge. We will hold him in the Kokaitis until the end of days. Naruto finally looked up, his gaze passing over the Devil King and landing on the Seraph. There was no awe, no fear, no recognition of rank. He was a gardener looking at someone who wanted to take a weed out of his field. No, Naruto said, the single word spoken with absolute, unshakable finality. The silence that followed was so profound it was almost deafening. A human, a being of unknown origin and power, had just flatly refused the leader of the Seraphim. Michael's serene expression faltered, a flicker of surprise crossing his angelic features. I beg your pardon, I said no, Naruto repeated, standing up. You wish to take him, lock him in a prison, and let him fester. You want to contain the disease. I intend to cure it. Cure it, Searzek interjected, taking a step forward. Kokobile's madness is not an illness to be cured. He is a fundamental aspect of his own being. What are you suggesting? Naruto turned his gaze on the Devil King. You are all the same, he said, his voice tinged with a deep, ancient weariness. You devils, you angels. You think in terms of prisons and battlefields. Punishment and control. You prune the diseased branches, but you never think to heal the roots. He turned back to Kokobile and once again placed his hand on the fallen's chest. This one's power is built on a foundation of stolen light. A corruption of what he once was. His very existence is a blight. The golden light emanating from Naruto's hand intensified. Life wastes nothing. It recycles. It reclaims. I am going to reclaim the energy he has corrupted. I am going to compost the weed. A collective gasp went through the crowd. He wasn't just talking about taking Kokobile's power. He was talking about erasing his very nature. Unmaking him on a fundamental level. That is an act of annihilation. Michael stated, his voice losing its gentle tone, replaced by a stern authority. You would destroy a soul. That is a power that no being has the right to wield. I am not destroying it, Naruto corrected calmly. I am purifying it. I am returning the stolen energy to the world it was stolen from. He looked around at the lush, vibrant campus. Where do you think the power to heal this place came from? I took it from the barrier that was poisoning it. I recycled it. Searzek and Michael exchanged a look of horrified comprehension. He was a walking, talking, conceptual recycling plant for the universe's fundamental energies. The implications were staggering. "This is not a debate," Naruto stated, his attention returning to Kokubile. The light from his hand began to spread over the fallen angel's body, which started to glow from within. "This is pest control. Stop him." A voice, filled with panicked rage, came not from the leaders, but from Zenobia. She raised Durandal, her face a mask of righteous fury. "He is tampering with the sacred systems of life and death. This is blasphemy," she charged. A blue blur of holy power aimed directly at Naruto. Naruto didn't even turn to look at her. Just as Zenobia was about to bring her legendary sword down on him, a wall of wood, as hard as diamond and interwoven with living roots, erupted from the ground, blocking her path. She crashed into it with a sickening thud, the impact throwing her backward. "The girl has fire," Naruto noted absently. "But she is a tool. Just like her sword. She does not understand." Sirzex acted. He couldn't allow this to happen, not in front of everyone. It was a breakdown of all known laws. He raised a hand, a sphere of his family's signature power of destruction coalescing in his palm. It was an energy that erased all it touched from existence. "I cannot allow you to do this," the Devil King said, his voice grave. Naruto finally turned his head to look at Sirzex. He saw the sphere of annihilation. He didn't seem threatened. He seemed disappointed. "And there it is," he sighed. "The ultimate answer of your kind. When you do not understand something, you erase it. You are not a king. You are a glorified janitor, sweeping inconvenient dust under the rug of non-existence." He took his hand off Kokubile and faced Sirzex fully. He raised his own hand. He did not gather energy. He did not summon a weapon. He simply held his palm open, and from the ground around him, a single, perfect white rose grew with impossible speed. It bloomed in an instant. "Your power is the end," Naruto said softly. "Mine is the beginning. Let us see which is stronger." He closed his hand, crushing the rose. And Sirzex Lucifer, one of the most powerful beings in creation, screamed. He dropped to one knee, clutching his chest, the power of destruction in his hand fizzling out into nothing. His face, usually so calm, was contorted in agony. Rias cried out, "Brother! What did you do to him?" Seraphal Leviathan shrieked, her magical girl persona vanishing, replaced by the cold fury of a Satan. "I did nothing to him," Naruto replied calmly. His hand still closed in a fist. "I did it to the rose. But all life is connected. A king and a flower are not so different. I merely demonstrated that connection. I showed him what it feels like when a life he is connected to is extinguished. A fraction of the pain his own power causes." He opened his hand. The crushed petals were gone. A new, perfect white rose bloomed in his palm. As it did, Sirzex's agony vanished. He gasped for breath, sweat beading on his forehead, looking at Naruto with a new expression, not of anger, not of curiosity, but of pure, unadulterated terror. He had not been attacked. He had been taught, and the lesson was terrifying. Naruto turned his back on the speechless leaders and returned his attention to the now brightly glowing Kokubile. "The debate is over." He placed both hands on the fallen angel. The light became blinding. Kokubile's body began to convulse. His 10 black wings began to shed their feathers, which dissolved into motes of dark energy before being drawn into Naruto's hands. The immense, corrupt holy power within him was being systematically drained, purified, and absorbed. The process was not violent. It was quiet, efficient, and horrifyingly absolute. When the light faded, Kokubile was still there, unconscious. But he was different, smaller, diminished. His wings were gone. The overwhelming aura of power that had surrounded him had vanished, replaced by the simple, faint life force of a mortal. Naruto stood up, a visible wave of exhaustion washing over him. A fine tremor ran through his hands, and his face was pale. The act of purifying a being of that magnitude had taken a tremendous toll. "He is no longer a fallen angel," Naruto announced to the stunned crowd. "I have taken back the power he corrupted. He is now merely a man. What you do with the man is your own concern. My work here is done." Without another word, he turned and began to walk away, his steps heavy with fatigue. The roots and vines that had pacified the battlefield receded back into the earth. The sleeping exorcists began to stir. The garden was clean, but the harvest had come at a price. Rias watched him go, her heart aching with a mixture of fear, gratitude, and a profound, bone-deep sorrow for the lonely, tired gardener who carried the weight of a dead world on his shoulders. She had wanted to protect his peace. Instead, she had brought the kings of the world to his doorstep, and in response, he had been forced to show them why he was a being that should never, ever be disturbed. Chapter 8 End.